Leah Simmons had been my anchor since sophomore year at the University of Oregon. We first met in a cramped literature seminar, both of us late, both scrambling for the last 2 seats left. She shot me a crooked grin and whispered, "Guess we're screwed together." That was all it took. From then on, we were inseparable. We shared apartments, patched each other up through brutal breakups, toasted promotions, and wandered through quiet streets at night just to keep talking. Life pulled us to different corners of Portland. Me to a small East Side apartment, her to a duplex across town. But Fridays were untouchable. Maple Grind was ours. The cafe was nothing fancy. Mismatched chairs, chalkboard menus, chipped mugs regulars claimed like trophies. But the place had the perfect balance of background hum and stillness, letting conversations unravel for hours. That's where we emptied out our weeks over lattes, trading stories of bad bosses and strange dreams. It was late March 2021 when the rhythm broke. Rain had been drumming since dawn, turning sidewalks slick and streets into silver mirrors. Stuck in traffic, I watched the clock eat away at our meeting time. By the time I pushed through Maple Grind's door, dripping wet, Leah was already at our spot by the window. Her coffee sat untouched, her hands cupped around the mug like she needed its warmth. "You okay?" I asked, dropping into the chair opposite her. She hesitated too long. "Yeah, just tired, but I'd known her for nearly a decade." Her shoulders curled in, her eyes flicked toward the counter too often. That's when I saw him. Tall black raincoat dripping onto the floor, standing unnaturally still as he waited. His gaze swept the room, then froze on us. It lingered. We tried to talk, but Leah's voice was thin, her laugh absent. The usual cozy murmur of the cafe felt muted, strained. One of the baristas, a kid with unruly dark hair, kept pacing behind the register, glancing at the door like he was bracing for something. Leah leaned forward, lips parting to speak, but stopped when the man approached our table. "Leah," he said, his voice soft yet sharp. "You weren't answering my calls." Her face went pale. She whispered my name, not as a greeting, but a warning. "This is Evan," she said quickly, barely meeting my eyes. "My ex. He's been showing up." I pushed my chair back and stood. "She doesn't want to talk to you." His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. "This isn't your business." Before I could reply, the barista's voice rang out, firm. "Sir, you need to leave." Evan's hand slipped into his coat. A cold certainty gripped me. I was about to watch something irreversible. But instead of a gun, he pulled a switchblade. The metallic click echoed like a gunshot as the blade snapped open, pointed at me. Everything slowed. The sharp inhale from Leah, the scrape of a chair, the bitter smell of espresso heavy in the air. Then chaos. A man near the door lunged, tackling Evan from behind. The knife clattered across the floor, spinning before sliding beneath a table. Shouts erupted, chairs crashed, coffee spilled. I grabbed Leah's arm and yanked her toward the back. Her hand was ice cold in mine as we slipped on the wet tile, shoving through the exit into the alley. Rain lashed our faces, but we didn't stop until we reached the next block, collapsing under the awning of a closed bookstore. Leah pressed against the wall, breath ragged, eyes scanning the shadows like she expected him to appear again. "You have to tell me what's going on," I said, keeping my voice steady. Her throat worked as she swallowed. "It's been weeks. He's been at my place, my job. I thought if I ignored him..." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want to drag you into it." Distant sirens cut through the storm. My fists were clenched, nails biting into skin. Too late. "We're going to the police." Minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up outside the cafe. We walked back cautious, but the scene was under control. Evan stood cuffed, raincoat heavy with water, his face unreadable as officers led him into a cruiser. The man who had tackled him gave us a small nod like it was nothing. Inside, we gave our statements. Leah trembled beside me, her fingers tapping the table in jittery bursts. The knife sat sealed in an evidence bag, its blade catching the harsh fluorescent light, glinting sharp and final. The officer in charge explained that Evan would be booked, though bail was still a possibility. "We'll process a restraining order," he added, his voice heavy with the tired cadence of someone who'd said those words too many times. "But it'll take a while." The rain outside hadn't let up, and when we stepped out, Leah seemed diminished, as if the day itself had pressed her down. "Can I stay at your place?" she asked, her voice quiet, uncertain. "Of course," I said without hesitation. That night she curled up on my couch beneath an old quilt, the television flickering in soft bursts of light. I sat in the armchair with a book open in my lap, eyes skimming lines I couldn't read, ears straining for every shift of sound outside. Days slid into weeks. Leah stayed with me, only venturing out for work and never alone. She changed her number, erased her social media, refused to answer knocks at the door unless we expected someone. Every creak of the hallway floor made her shoulders stiffen. Every unfamiliar face on the street stole her attention. Slowly, I came to understand the suffocating erosion of normalcy when you're being watched. It wasn't just fear of what Evan might do, but the gnawing question of when. Even in my apartment, I found myself checking locks twice, glancing at windows, convinced some piece of him lingered just out of sight. The restraining order finally arrived, a flimsy sheet of paper that felt laughably thin against the memory of a blade glinting under fluorescent light. Still, Leah held onto it like it was proof she hadn't imagined the danger. One night, over half-empty takeout boxes and sitcom reruns that neither of us were really watching, Leah admitted the truth she'd hidden. "He followed me home from work once," she said, her voice nearly a whisper. "Didn't try anything. Just stood across the street. Hours. I thought I could handle it alone. I didn't want to burden you." I set my chopsticks down. "Leah, you're my best friend." "You could never be a burden, but you could have been." I cut myself short, the weight of what I almost said hanging in the air. She nodded, her gaze locked on the food she hadn't touched. I know, outside, the rain tapped steadily against the glass, marking time, reminding us that the city was still wide awake, and so was he. By summer, the rain gave way to long, hot evenings, the sun lingering well past 9. Leah had returned to her own place, though I still called nightly. She sounded better, steadier, though a thread of caution ran beneath her words. One Thursday, she invited me over. Dinner was set with mismatched plates, and on the table sat the bottle of wine we'd saved since college, waiting for some elusive right moment. We laughed over old stories, swapped gossip, and for a while it felt like we'd reclaimed the past. Then, as we were clearing dishes, Leah froze, her eyes locked on the front window. My body braced before I even looked. Across the street, a man leaned against a lamppost, half swallowed by shadow. No raincoat this time, but the posture, too still, too deliberate, sent a jolt through me. "It's not him," Leah said quickly, reading my thoughts. "Just someone." But her voice wavered, and I didn't believe her. Neither did she. We sat back down, pretending to finish our wine, our glances drifting to the window again and again. And then, without a sound, the spot was empty. After that night, I stopped believing in clean endings. Leah adapted in her own way. Security cameras, self-defense classes, her phone always within reach. I stayed close, not because she needed protecting, but because I knew the quiet ruin of living with the chance that the worst might return without warning. The last time we spoke of Evan, we were on a park bench watching children play tag. Leah said she'd stopped wishing for him to be arrested again. Now she only hoped he'd forget her. "That's the scariest part," she said softly. "Not knowing if you're still in someone's head." I didn't have an answer. We sat in silence as the late sun fell through the trees. In the end, Maple Grind wasn't just the site of one violent interruption. It was proof of how fragile safety really is, how quickly the ordinary can twist into something unrecognizable. I learned then that when someone you love is in danger, you don't wait for them to ask for help. You act. Because silence is where fear grows strongest. And sometimes the only thing that can drown it out is the voice of someone who refuses to let you face it alone. I never used to think about how some days begin. You wake up, make coffee, check your phone, and assume it's just another dot on the calendar. But later you look back and realize something was off from the first breath you took, like the day had already decided where it would take you, whether you agreed or not. That Monday morning in late October of 2019 felt exactly like that. I'd been in Cedar Hill for 3 years, long enough to know the town's rhythm. Slow breakfasts at the diner, the hiss of buses pulling away from the terminal, the damp forest smell right before the snow came. I worked from home as a freelance illustrator, at least I tried to. My biggest client, a small press specializing in obscure graphic novels, had gone silent 2 months ago, leaving me scrambling to pay rent. I picked up scraps of work, pet portraits, commissioned character art for indie authors, but it never quite added up. That night, I'd been at my friend Molly's apartment in a neighboring suburb. Molly's place was warm and crowded with life. You could lose track of time just listening to her talk. We ordered takeout, opened a bottle of wine, and suddenly the clock read 10:47 p.m. "You better hustle if you want to make that last bus," she said, handing me my coat. "You're crashing here," she added. "You miss it," I laughed. "I'll make it." The terminal's what, 15 minutes from here? It ended up being closer to 20. By the time I reached the Cedar Hill bus terminal, my breath came out in sharp clouds. October in Vermont wasn't gentle. The cold had a metallic edge that crawled through gloves and settled in your bones. The place was almost empty. A flickering vending machine hummed near the entrance. In the far corner, a janitor in a faded hoodie pushed a broom slowly, like he had all night to finish the job. I noticed a man sitting on one of the benches, long green coat, shoulders hunched, still as a statue. He looked up briefly when I walked in, and his eyes caught the overhead light just enough to make me look away. I sat 2 benches away, hugging my sketchbook to my chest. My phone screen showed 8% battery, just enough to text Molly that I'd made it. The janitor disappeared into a storage closet. The air felt heavier once he was gone. "Do you believe in patterns?" The man's voice was low and rasping, like he hadn't used it in hours. I glanced over. Not really sure what you mean." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Some nights are designed to happen a certain way, no matter what you do. You can change the order of the steps, but not where you end up." I gave a small, polite smile, the kind you give strangers when you don't want to encourage them. "That's so?" He nodded once, eyes locked on me. "You'll see." Before I could think of a way to end the conversation, the hiss of air brakes filled the room. The last bus had arrived. The relief that washed over me when the headlights spilled across the terminal windows was almost physical. I stood slinging my bag over my shoulder. The bus door opened with a groan and I climbed aboard quickly. The driver wasn't Tom, the stocky older guy with a quick smile who liked to tell corny jokes. This driver looked younger, maybe mid-30s, but his face had a drawn, unhealthy pallor. His eyes were sunken, and when he smiled, it didn't reach anywhere near them. "Evening," I said, swiping my pass. He gave a short nod, that strange smile still fixed in place. I chose a seat in the middle out of habit, close enough to the driver to feel safe, far enough not to be in his mirror constantly. The man in the green coat boarded next, taking a seat 2 rows behind me. The bus pulled away from the terminal, the engine grumbling. For the first few blocks, the windows reflected the inside lights, but once we hit the outskirts of town, the glass turned black, showing only the trees sliding past. I told myself it was just a normal ride. In 20 minutes, I'd be unlocking my apartment door, heating up leftover pasta, curling under the blanket my grandmother had knitted. But 20 minutes came and went. The road outside was unfamiliar. No gas stations, no street lamps, just dense forest pressing close to the edge of the asphalt. I frowned, leaning toward the aisle to see ahead. After another 10 minutes, I got up and walked to the front, keeping my voice steady. "Is this the Cedar Hill route?" "Excuse me." The driver met my eyes in the rearview mirror, his tone echoing that strange emphasis the man at the terminal had used. "We're getting there eventually." Behind me, a low chuckle. The man in the green coat. My fingers tightened on the seat back. "This doesn't look like the route," I said. The driver just smiled again and turned his eyes back to the road. I walked back to my seat, my pulse thudding in my ears. The bus kept going deeper into the dark. I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. In the dim reflection of the window, I could see him. The man in the green coat leaning slightly forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on me. He didn't blink often. I tried not to panic. Maybe there was some detour, some construction I hadn't heard about. But why hadn't the driver said anything? Why hadn't anyone else boarded? The bus rolled on, the forest outside pressing tighter, the road twisting in ways I didn't recognize. My phone was dead now, a useless weight in my coat pocket. After what felt like an hour since leaving the terminal, the bus slowed and eased onto a narrow shoulder. No signpost, no houses, not even the faint glow of a porch light. The driver turned in his seat to look at me. "This is your stop." I stared at him. "No, it's not. I'm not getting off here." His smile widened, but his eyes stayed flat. "It is tonight." I felt the shift in the air behind me before I saw it. The man in the green coat stood, stepping into the aisle. His presence filled the narrow space, blocking the way to the back. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. "No mistake," the man said softly. "It's just how it goes." The open bus door let in a gust of icy air. I could hear the wind in the trees, a deep rushing sound like the ocean inside a seashell. I gripped my sketchbook like it might somehow protect me. My options were slim: push past him toward the back and pray there was an emergency exit, or take my chances out there in the dark. The driver tapped the steering wheel, impatient. "Time to move." I took a slow step forward, then another, my mind racing. The ground outside was hard, frozen under a thin skin of frost. The moment I stepped down, the bus door hissed shut behind me. The rumble of the engine faded as it pulled away, leaving me alone with the man in the green coat. The headlights swept over the trees one last time before disappearing. "You'll be fine," he said. "If you keep walking." "Where am I?" I asked. "Somewhere between where you were and where you're going," he said, smiling faintly as if the words were a private joke. I turned away from him and started walking down the road. My breath puffed white in the dark. My toes ached in my boots. Each step made me more aware of how far I was from anything familiar. Every few seconds I glanced back. The man wasn't following, but he was still there, standing exactly where I'd left him, his silhouette a dark slash against the trees. The road curved sharply, and for a brief moment I couldn't see him anymore. That should have been a relief, but instead my chest tightened. The silence was too complete. No crickets, no rustle of leaves, just the steady rhythm of my own footsteps. Somewhere ahead, a faint light appeared. I quickened my pace, hope flaring. It turned out to be an old gas station, boarded up and long abandoned. The windows were dark, but a dented metal trash can lay tipped on its side near the entrance. I don't know what made me look behind me then, but when I did, the road was empty. The man was gone. That was almost worse. I kept walking. My legs burned. My hands were numb. The cold had crept into my jaw so badly my teeth ached. Eventually, I saw the faint orange glow of a street lamp in the distance. When I reached it, I realized I was less than 3 miles from my apartment. I recognized the curve of the road, the sagging porch of the Miller place, the row of mailboxes leaning toward the ditch. My boots felt too heavy, so I kicked them off and walked barefoot the rest of the way. I told myself it was to be quiet, but really I think I just wanted to feel the pavement, to know it was solid under me. As I climbed my apartment stairs, I heard it. Soft, distant laughter carried on the wind. It wasn't close, but it was clear enough to make my skin prickle. Inside, I locked the door and slid down against it, clutching my sketchbook. I stayed like that until the first light of morning bled through the blinds. I never saw the man in the green coat again. I never saw that driver again either. But some nights, when I'm walking home late, I'll see the headlights of a bus cutting through the dark in the distance, and I'll cross the street just in case. People always ask what I think really happened that night. I tell them the truth, I don't know. Maybe it was a setup. Maybe it was a mistake. Or maybe it was one of those nights, the kind the man talked about, the kind that's designed from the start. Some warnings come too late, but the ones we notice in time are only useful if we act on them. Trust your instincts even when you can't explain why. They might be the only thing standing between you and the point of no return. Looking back, I still can't pinpoint the exact moment when things started to turn strange. It didn't happen like in a movie, with a swelling score that warned you something terrible was about to happen. It was quieter, slower, like a draft sneaking under a door. The summer of 2017 was supposed to be my first real taste of adulthood. I just landed an entry-level job at a small publishing company in Richmond, Virginia. The building itself was a character, floors that groaned under every step, humming fluorescent lights, and a coffee pot that produced liquid tasting faintly of burnt toast no matter who brewed it. I was 23, broke, and sharing a one-bedroom apartment above a florist shop with my best friend, Holly Peterson. We'd met freshman year of college, back when we thought starting our own press would be some romantic act of rebellion. Instead, we were proofreading casserole cookbooks and answering emails about delayed print runs. But even that felt like progress. The office was its own little ecosystem of 15 people, each stranger than the last. Mara, the receptionist, somehow knew everyone's secrets without ever prying. Phil from Layout wore the same faded corduroy jacket year-round as if it were a uniform. And then there was our boss, Ruth, whose voice always sounded like she was delivering bad news even when she wasn't. Holly's desk sat in the back by the printers, while mine was near the window up front. We'd wave at each other across the room and slip sarcastic post-it notes under each other's keyboards about the day's chaos. For the first month, it was boring in the most comforting way possible. Coffee runs, splitting sandwiches from the deli next door, and awkward office birthday celebrations where everyone stood around singing too softly, staring at their shoes. Then in early August, Daniel Price started. He was late 20s, tall but not imposing, with pale skin and a habit of never quite meeting your eyes, or holding your gaze just a beat too long when he did. He barely spoke beyond what his job demanded. I didn't think much of it at first. Some people are just quiet, but there was something else. Something I noticed immediately. He never smiled. Not once. At lunch one day, I mentioned it to Holly. "He never smiles," I said, unwrapping my sandwich. "Not even a polite one," she shrugged, stabbing at her salad. "He's probably just shy." She said it like that was the end of the discussion, but I couldn't shake the way he always seemed to be near her. By the printer with no papers in his hands. In the break room just as she walked in from lunch. Always a step behind her, too often to be coincidence. Mara noticed it too. One afternoon, as I was passing the front desk, she leaned toward me and whispered, "Your friend's got an admirer." Her tone didn't sound like gossip. It sounded like a warning. It started small. Sticky notes left on Holly's desk when she stepped away. Never signed, always vague. "You have a nice laugh. Some people don't appreciate you enough." We joked about it at first, figuring some awkward office flirt was testing the waters. Then came the clown figurines. The first one showed up on a Yee. Wednesday, a little porcelain clown with a cracked smile, sitting on Holly's chair when she arrived. We laughed, called it creepy, and set it on her desk like it was a gag gift. 2 days later, another appeared. Then another. By the time there were 4, she started keeping them in a drawer so she didn't have to see their painted eyes staring at her all day. Around that time, I had my own encounter. I was working late, the office dark except for the pool of light from my desk lamp. The hum of the building seemed louder without anyone else around. I heard the water cooler bubble and turned. Daniel was standing by Holly's desk. He wasn't touching anything, just staring at her empty chair like he was studying it. "Daniel?" I said, my voice sounding too sharp in the stillness. He didn't move at first. Then slowly he looked at me, eyes pale and unblinking before turning and walking out without a word. The silence he left behind felt heavier than before, like the office itself was holding its breath. "Daniel," I said, my voice coming out thinner than I meant. He turned slowly, almost theatrically, his eyes meeting mine for a heartbeat before he gave a single, deliberate nod. Without a word, he brushed past me, the faint smell of his coffee clinging to the air. I stood frozen a second longer than necessary, then forced myself to breathe. I told Holly the next day. She forced a laugh, but her fingers kept worrying the edge of her paper cup until it bent. "You're overthinking," she said, but her eyes flickered with something she couldn't disguise. From then on, we made an unspoken rule. Neither of us would ever be in the office alone with him. The turning point came on a Friday morning. I'd come in early, hoping to get a head start before a deadline. The office was quiet except for the copier humming in the corner, its rhythm oddly loud in the stillness. As I walked past the break room, I saw him, Daniel, sitting at the table with a mug of coffee. In front of him was a clown figurine, just like the others. But this one was different. There was a photo tucked under it, a candid shot of Holly taken from the side, her hair pulled back, wearing an old t-shirt. It wasn't from work. My stomach dropped, cold sweat blooming at my collar when I realized it was taken from our apartment balcony. My voice caught in my throat. "Where did you—" He smiled. For the first time since I'd met him, he smiled, and it wasn't kind. It was slow, deliberate, like he'd been saving it. I backed out of the break room, my heart hammering, and went straight to Holly's desk. "Pack your bag," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Now." We left without telling anyone, my pulse pounding all the way down the stairs. That weekend we called the police. They ran his name and found a history, a restraining order from a former coworker in another state. The details made my hands tremble as I held the phone. On Monday, the company fired him, but that wasn't the end. Within 2 weeks, Holly started getting envelopes with no return address. Inside each one was a single clown sticker. No note, no explanation. Just the sticker staring back at her from our kitchen table like a taunt. We reported it, but nothing came of it. Without proof of who sent them, the police couldn't do much. We changed the locks on the apartment, kept the blinds closed, avoided walking alone after dark. Holly stopped sitting on the balcony altogether. Months later, the letters stopped. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he moved on. But even now, years later, I still catch myself scanning crowds for his face. Holly and I both carry that summer like a shadow, sometimes invisible, but always there. We never figured out how he got the photos, whether he followed us home or watched from somewhere nearby. Sometimes I think about asking Holly if she still has the clown figurines, but I don't really want to know. It's strange how a person can enter your life so quietly and leave behind something you never shake. I think about that first smile he gave me, how it felt like the air in the room shifted. And I remember deciding in that moment that we had to leave right then, without second guessing. When your instincts tell you something is wrong, trust them. Danger doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides in small, unsettling patterns. It's better to act and be wrong than to hesitate and find out you were right too late. There are mornings that seem ordinary until time sharpens them into something unforgettable. Years later, you can still smell the coffee, hear the scrape of a chair against tile, remember the exact tone of someone saying your name. One morning in April 2016 has lived in my head ever since. I was 20 then, still clumsy with the question of who I wanted to be. That spring I'd moved to Port Towns, Washington. It wasn't far, just across the state, but it felt like stepping into another life. My cousin let me crash on the couch in his shoebox apartment above a laundromat. The floors trembled when the dryers kicked on. The walls were thin enough to catch the neighbors' late-night sitcom reruns, and the kitchen barely fit 2 people without a collision. But it was cheap and it was temporary. Lena Carter had been my best friend since sophomore year of high school. She'd joined me at the same community college a month earlier, limping out of a breakup with a guy who had wrung every bit of brightness out of her. We slid back into our rhythm easily, most mornings spent at the Velvet Bean, a snug little coffee shop pressed between an antique bookstore and a bike repair shop. The Bean was all big windows that blurred with rain, a rotating gallery of local art, and a constant trickle of soft indie music. Our corner booth was half hidden, perfect for whispering secrets or just breathing quietly. That morning the sky was flat gray, fog rolling off the water so thick the ferry horn sounded close enough to touch. Lena was doodling in the margin of her notebook like always, while I slogged through a reading for Intro to Sociology. We were already halfway through our second round of Americanos when the door opened. A couple stepped in first, mid-30s, dressed crisp like they'd just slipped out of a boardroom. With them was a girl, maybe 8 or 9, in a faded yellow sweater. She clutched a stuffed rabbit so tight the ears bent sideways. Straight brown hair framed her face, but her eyes didn't seem to land on anything. "Cute bunny," Lena murmured, following my gaze. "But she looks, I don't know, not happy. Weird place to bring a kid." I nodded. It wasn't just her silence, it was the faint bruises along her wrist, revealed when her sleeve slid back. The couple ordered drinks and sat across from us, whispering in clipped, sharp tones that carried the shape of an argument. The girl sat perfectly still, rabbit locked in her grip like it was the only thing keeping her tethered. The woman's phone rang and both adults stepped outside, leaving the girl alone. I glanced at Lena. The way the girl kept flicking her eyes to the door made my stomach tighten. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Lena asked. "Yeah," I muttered, sliding out of the booth. I approached slowly, crouching so I wouldn't loom over her. "Hey," I said softly, nodding at the rabbit. "That's a nice bunny. What's his name?" Her eyes darted to me, hesitant, like she wasn't sure I was real. "Ol," she whispered at last. "That's a great name," I said, smiling carefully. "I'm Mia. Is everything okay?" She looked toward the window where the couple stood with their backs to us. "Can't talk to people," she murmured. The way she said it, flat, not scared, not stubborn, made something twist hard in my chest. Her nails were bitten raw, some down to skin. "Do you want to help me pick out a cookie for Oliver?" I asked. tipping my chin toward the counter. She didn't smile, but she slid off her chair, rabbit dangling at her side, and followed me. Ty, the barista, was polishing mugs behind the counter. I caught his eye. He'd once broken up a fight in the cafe, once tossed out a drunk who wouldn't leave. He knew when something wasn't right. I gave him a look. I hoped Ty caught the look I gave him. While the girl's eyes drifted over the pastry case, Lena slid her phone onto her lap under the table, fingers flying. I knew she was either pulling up the non-emergency police number or texting someone who could respond faster. The door slammed open. The man strode back in, his voice tight and sharp. "Come here now." The girl froze. Without thinking, I moved in front of her. "She's not your business," he snapped, stepping closer. His hand darted toward her shoulder. Lena stood, her voice steady in a way that surprised me. "The police are on their way." He stopped mid-step. His face flickered, first anger, then something colder, calculated. His eyes shifted to the woman outside, then back to us. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. Ty came around the counter, phone in hand. "Trust me," he said evenly. "You'll regret it if you don't leave. Now." The man's jaw tightened. Then without another word, he spun around, grabbed the woman's arm, and yanked her out the door. The girl crumpled against her rabbit, quiet sobs muffled in the worn fur. Lena wrapped an arm around her shoulders and gently guided her back to our booth. I slid into the seat across from them, my eyes fixed on the window in case the couple returned. Ty spoke low and urgent into the phone. "Possible missing child. Adults, mid-30s, male and female. Left in a hurry, east on Water Street." The police arrived within 10 minutes. One officer knelt beside the girl, speaking softly, while the other took our statements. I told them about the bruises, her distant gaze, how she'd said she wasn't allowed to talk to people. Lena added her observations, her tone clipped and firm. When they finally led the girl outside, one of the officers paused at the door. "We've had a missing child alert out of Kitsap County for 2 weeks," he said. "You did the right thing. She's been reported missing." The door shut, and suddenly the coffee shop felt hollow, too quiet. Lena stared at her untouched drink. "We almost didn't say anything," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. My hands were still trembling. We stayed another hour, barely talking, both of us flinching every time the bell above the door jingled. I kept expecting the man to storm back in. That night, lying on the pull-out couch in my cousin's apartment, the scene replayed in loops. The girl's bitten nails, the bruises. The man's words, "You don't know what you're doing." But he was wrong. We knew exactly what we were doing. What scared me was how close we'd come to doing nothing. The next week, Lena and I went back to the Velvet Bean as if nothing had changed. Same booth, same coffee, same view of the street. But every so often, we'd both glance at the door, listening for the slam of it opening or the cut of a voice. Ty told us later that the police had called him. The girl had been reunited with her aunt who had custody. The couple was being investigated on multiple charges. That news should have brought relief. Instead, it left me uneasy. If we hadn't spoken up, she might still be out there with them. How many other kids were? Kids nobody noticed, or worse, kids people noticed and chose to ignore. Months later, Lena and I were walking downtown when I spotted a girl in a yellow sweater across the street. For a heartbeat, my chest clenched. I thought it was her. Then she laughed, running to her mother with an ice cream cone melting in her hand. Lena caught my expression. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. Because the truth was, that morning in the coffee shop had rewired something in me. It showed me how thin the line is between being a bystander and stepping in. Blink, and that line disappears. We never saw the girl again. I hope she's safe. I hope she still has Oliver the rabbit. I hope more people chose to step in for her. Even now, sitting in coffee shops, I catch myself scanning the room without meaning to. Not searching for trouble exactly, just watching for someone too quiet, too still, eyes too far away. When something feels wrong, don't brush it aside. Stepping in might feel awkward, inconvenient, even risky, but silence costs more than you think. You might be the only one willing to act, and for someone else, that can mean everything. It's strange how certain nights refuse to fade. Years pass, you switch jobs, lose friends, shapeshift into some new version of yourself. Yet one particular evening waits in the back of your mind like a splinter you never dig out. For me, that night was the Winter Carnival of 2013 in Maple Falls, Vermont. Every time snow drifts under streetlights, it resurfaces, the cold burrowing into my bones. The smell of fried dough hanging in the air, and the way my pulse kept hammering no matter how much I whispered to myself that everything was fine. I was 17 then, living with my Aunt Karen. My parents' marriage had come apart in one of those ugly unravelings where both swore they were right, too busy screaming to notice their kids stranded in the wreckage. Mom moved 3 states away to start fresh. Dad stayed behind but didn't bother to check if I was okay. Aunt Karen's house was small but warm, and she tried to fill the void they left. I kept my grades decent, worked weekends at the library, mostly kept to myself. The exception was Elliot James. Tall, lanky, always carrying a camera like it was fused to him. He'd been my closest friend since 5th grade. Sarcastic but never cruel. He noticed things. Frost clinging to mailboxes, the twitch in someone's eye when they lied. You couldn't hide from him. We'd survived braces, failed guitar lessons, and endless afternoons building snow forts together. That February, Elliot wouldn't shut up about the carnival. He wanted night shots for his portfolio. Ferris wheel lights against the snow, fireworks over the rink. I wasn't in the mood for crowds or cold, but saying no to him felt like saying no to the last shred of normal I had. So on Saturday night, bundled in 2 sweaters and my heaviest coat, I met him under the wooden arch at the fairgrounds. Maple Falls might have been small, but the carnival was its crown jewel. Folks drove in from neighboring counties to eat greasy food, play rigged games, skate on the fire department's makeshift rink. The air smelled of kettle corn and grilled sausage. Elliot was in his element, crouching for shots every few steps, the click of his shutter constant. I was halfway through hot chocolate when I noticed him. A man in a long brown coat and dark beanie. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Not smiling, not eating, not talking, just watching. And I knew his eyes were on us. I leaned toward Elliot. "You know that guy?" He followed my glance. "Nope, why?" "He's just, never mind." I told myself I was imagining it. Big crowds made you feel watched, but every time we moved, he was there, by the game booths near the fire pit off by the stage. When Elliot spotted a vantage point near a row of old storage sheds, my stomach twisted. It was quieter there, the music fading. My phone buzzed, Aunt Karen asking when I'd be home. I looked up mid-reply and froze. The man stood in the shadows between us and the nearest light pole. "Elliot," I whispered. "We should go back. One sec." "This shot's perfect." He was bent over his tripod, absorbed. The man stepped closer, snow crunching under boots. Each movement deliberate, rehearsed. I gripped Elliot's sleeve. He shook me off. "You two from around here?" the man asked. His voice was flat, practiced. Elliot hesitated. Yeah." The man's gaze locked on me, pressing against my skin. "Be careful walking back alone. Some people get lost out here." A crack split the air behind the sheds, wood or ice breaking. His head turned. I glimpsed something in his coat pocket. Not a phone, bulkier, heavier. "Elliot, now." My voice was sharper than I meant. We hurried back toward the fairgrounds. I didn't look back, though I felt his stare burning holes. Only when we hit the crowd did I notice my hands shaking. Elliot stopped suddenly, staring at his screen. "Look at this." His last shot was blurry, but the man was in it, smiling. No, grinning, wide enough to make my stomach clench. And behind him, half hidden by shadow, another figure. Someone I hadn't seen at all. I told him we needed security. He muttered it was probably nothing, maybe a prank. But he didn't delete the photo. We left early. I stayed at his house. Safer than walking home. His mom made popcorn, put on an old movie, but I couldn't focus. Every creak of the house made me jump. Outside, snow buried the carnival. That was the last time I went. For weeks, the photo stayed on Elliot's camera. We rarely mentioned it. Sometimes I'd catch him scrolling past, his thumb hovering over delete, then moving on. I told myself it was nothing. A weird coincidence, a trick of nerves, that we'd just been caught up in the tension of that night. But deep down, I didn't believe it. About a month later, I was walking home from the library when I spotted a long brown coat across the street. My heart jumped before my brain caught up. The man was halfway down the block, head bent, moving with that same unhurried pace. It might not have been him. Coats like that weren't rare, I told myself. But when he reached the corner, he stopped, turned his head, and looked straight at me. Then he kept walking. I went straight to Aunt Karen's, locked the door, and didn't tell her. I didn't want her thinking I was making things up for attention. Elliot had changed too. He was quieter, distracted, skipping our usual walks after school, saying he had editing to do. One afternoon, I dropped by his place unannounced. His camera sat on the kitchen table, screen glowing. The photo of the man in the brown coat was zoomed in so far the pixels blurred together, but you could still see the grin. "You're still looking at it," I said. He jumped like he'd been caught. "It's weird, right? Look at the other guy in the background. Doesn't it seem—" I leaned over. The shadowy figure was almost impossible to make out. Broad shoulders, maybe a hood. Could be anyone. "Yeah," Elliot said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. A few nights later, my phone buzzed at 11:42 p.m. A text from an unknown number. "You looked cold that night. Dress warmer next time." My chest went tight. I showed it to Elliot the next day and his face drained of color. "Respond?" he said. "Just don't. But by then I knew whoever had been watching us at the carnival hadn't stopped. After that text, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. I started checking behind me every time I walked home, taking longer routes just to see if anyone was keeping pace. Most nights the streets were empty, but sometimes I'd catch a flicker of movement in a shop window's reflection, or hear the crunch of footsteps in the snow that stopped when I stopped. I told myself it was just nerves. That's what fear does. It teaches you to doubt your own senses. One night in March, Elliot called and told me to meet him at the diner. He sounded urgent. When I got there, he was in a booth with his camera bag open and a manila envelope in front of him. He didn't even say hello, just slid the envelope across the table. Inside were printed photos, grainy, taken at night from a distance. Us at the carnival, at the library, walking home. In one, I was standing at Aunt Karen's mailbox, head down, flipping through letters. "These were in my locker this morning," he said. No note, no explanation. I stared at the photos. "You think it's him?" Elliot nodded slowly. "Look at the angle. They're taken from far away, but always the same height, same lens every time." I didn't want to believe it, but I'd known for weeks something wasn't right. Whoever this was, they weren't just lurking at public events anymore. They were in our neighborhoods. That night I asked Aunt Karen if I could start staying later at the library to help with closing. She didn't question it, just reminded me to take the well-lit streets home. I didn't tell her about the photos or the text. Part of me thought saying it out loud would make it worse, but silence didn't keep him away. The last time I saw the man in the brown coat was in early April, a week before the snow melted for good. Elliot had convinced me to walk out to the old railway bridge for some sunset shots. The place was deserted, just rusted steel over the river and the low hum of water below. We were halfway across when I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the bridge, hands in his coat pockets, face shadowed by the sinking sun. That grin, I recognized it instantly. "Elliot," I said quietly. "I see him." His voice was tight. He raised his camera like he was about to take a picture, but the man took one slow step forward, then another. There was nowhere to go except back the way we came. My legs felt heavy, but I forced them to move. The man didn't speed up, didn't shout, just kept closing the distance with that deliberate walk. Halfway back to solid ground, I heard Elliot's shutter click twice, then stop. I didn't look back until we hit the road. When I did, the man was gone, just an empty bridge behind us. We went straight to the police station. They took our statements, glanced at the photos, said there wasn't much they could do without proof of a direct threat or trespassing. That night, Elliot called and said he'd finally deleted the carnival photo. "Looking at it, he'll stop," he said. I wanted to believe him. Maybe if we stop. A week later, he and his mom moved to Burlington. My aunt said it was for a job opportunity, but I never got the real reason from him. We still text sometimes, but we don't talk about the winter carnival. As for me, I still live in Maple Falls. I still walk past the fairgrounds in winter. And every so often, just at the edge of the snow-lit dark, I swear I see a tall figure in a brown coat, standing too still to be anyone in a hurry, watching, waiting. You can tell yourself it's nothing. You can try to explain it away. But when something feels wrong, trust your instincts. Fear might lie to you, but so can comfort. And sometimes the worst mistake is convincing yourself there's no danger at all. There are some friendships you don't just drift away from. no matter how much time passes or how much the two of you change. Caleb Moore was that anchor for me. If my life was a series of orbits, he was the sun I kept circling, even when I knew I should break free. We first met in the 4th grade. Caleb punched a kid square in the nose for stealing my lunch money. It wasn't some noble act of justice. Caleb just liked to fight, but to me it felt like someone had decided I was worth defending. From that day on, we were inseparable. Sleepovers that stretched until dawn, detention slips stuffed in our backpacks, late-night bike rides through the bad parts of town. My parents hated it. They didn't see the boy who knelt on cracked pavement to bandage my knees with strips swiped from his mom's bathroom cabinet. They only saw the kid who once set a neighbor's mailbox on fire just to see how high the flames would go. By the time I was 19, my excuses had run out. My life wasn't moving forward. I'd already dropped out of community college after 1 semester. The lectures felt like static, the assignments pointless. The longer I sat in those suffocating classrooms, the louder the thought became, I don't belong here. My parents didn't take it well. My dad, a machinist who'd spent 3 decades grinding away at the same factory job, treated quitting like I'd carved failure into my skin. He wasn't a yeller when I was growing up, but that spring every word between us was an argument waiting to happen. The night it all blew apart, we were in the kitchen. My dad leaned against the counter, arms folded, jaw set hard. His voice cut sharp through the room. You think the world owes you something? I never said that. You don't have a plan. You just quit. Better than wasting years doing something I hate, I shot back. He shook his head slowly, like I was speaking a language he couldn't translate. My mom stood in the doorway with her arms wrapped tight around herself, her silence louder than any words. Heat rose in my chest until I couldn't stand it anymore. You know what? Forget it, I snapped, snatching my jacket from the chair. I don't need this. I stormed out without looking back. 2 blocks away, my hands shaking, I pulled out my phone and dialed Caleb. He picked up on the second ring. You sound like a guy who needs a beer, he said. Or 10, I muttered. Can you come get me? Already on my way. When his beat-up Toyota finally pulled up, the music blasted so loud the bass rattled the side mirrors. Caleb leaned out the window, grinning like the night belonged to us. Forget them, he said. You don't need to listen to anyone. You've got me. I climbed in, and for the first time that night, the knot in my chest loosened. The first week on Caleb's couch blurred into greasy takeout boxes and midnight walks. Endless card games that stretched until the sun broke over the horizon. It felt like a vacation from my own life. No lectures, no disapproving stares, no one demanding a plan I didn't have. Caleb made the world feel like it was ours alone. We'd sit on his balcony smoking cheap cigarettes, watching the city lights glitter like they'd been strung up just for us. But underneath that easy freedom, I started noticing cracks. He'd vanish for hours without explanation, returning with the faint smell of sweat and cigarettes clinging to his clothes, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes sharp and restless, like he'd been riding a wave of adrenaline. Other nights he'd come back carrying thick stacks of cash, shoving them quickly into a dented metal box with chipped paint that he kept locked under his bed. He never let it out of his sight for long, and that was when I began to realize Caleb's orbit might not just pull me closer. It might drag me under. One night, Caleb stumbled through the door with a black eye blooming across his face and his lips split raw. What the hell happened? I asked, rising from the couch. Bar fight, he muttered, shrugging off his jacket and tossing it onto the cushions. Since when do you go to bars, that punch back? I pressed, trying to catch his eyes. He smirked, but it was shallow, brittle. Don't worry about it. But I did. 2 nights later, while Caleb was in the shower, a knock rattled the apartment door. I opened it without thinking. A man stood there. Mid-40s maybe, tall, broad-shouldered, a worn leather jacket hanging off him. His eyes were flat, dead glass marbles. His voice was steady, deliberate. Tell Caleb I'll see him Friday. And if he's not there, we've got a problem. He turned and walked off before I could form a reply. When I told Caleb later, I caught the briefest flicker, his body stiffening. His face locked tight before he forced a laugh. Yeah, that's nothing. Don't worry about it. But I couldn't shake it. And when Friday came, the worry in my chest hardened into something heavier. Caleb never came home that night. My calls went unanswered. My texts sat unread. Every creak in the old apartment building felt like a warning, my stomach tightening until I could barely sit still. Just after sunrise, the lock clicked. Caleb stumbled in, pale and slick with sweat, his eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. He shoved the dented metal box into a backpack, zipped it hard, and said in a low, urgent voice, "We need to leave. Now." "What's going on?" I demanded. "I'll explain later. Just grab your stuff." "No," I said, planting my feet. "Tell me now." His jaw tightened, his gaze darting to the door as if someone might burst in at any second. "You'll understand soon." We drove in silence, the city shrinking in the rearview mirror, its skyline swallowed by rust and weeds as Caleb steered us toward the industrial outskirts. Empty factories loomed like skeletons against the gray morning sky. He pulled behind a boarded-up warehouse, cut the engine, and turned to me. "Stay in the car. I mean it." Before I could answer, he slipped out and vanished through a side door. Minutes dragged like hours. Then came the shouting, muffled but sharp, followed by the metallic crash of something heavy. My hands locked around the seat, knuckles aching white. The door banged open. Caleb sprinted out, breath tearing from his chest, a dark figure chasing close behind. He dove into the driver's seat, jammed the car into gear, and we screeched out of the lot, tires screaming on the cracked asphalt. Halfway back to town, he finally spoke. His voice was ragged, stripped bare. "I've been running stolen electronics for a local crew. Missed a delivery. They think I skimmed from them. That guy at the door? They know who you are now. Which means you're not safe either." After that night, the orbit shifted. Caleb stopped calling. The silence between us widened until it felt like an abyss. I packed up and went back to my parents' house. They didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. The air at home was tense but safer. Weeks blurred into months. Every so often I thought about reaching out, dialing his number just to hear his voice. But every time I saw that man's flat, cold eyes staring back at me, and the urge died. Then one afternoon a postcard slid through the mail slot. No return address, no picture. Just a single line scrawled in Caleb's uneven handwriting. "Better you stay away from me." It's safer. I keep it tucked in the back of my desk drawer. It's been years now. I never saw Caleb again. Sometimes I wonder if he's still alive, still running, or if the problems he dragged behind him finally caught up. A part of me hopes he found a way out. Another part knows people like Caleb rarely do. Loyalty is a powerful thing, but it can drag you under too. Loving someone doesn't mean following them into the fire. Sometimes the only way to save a friend is to let go, before the flames take you both. By April 2022, Chicago felt less like a city and more like a maze I couldn't escape. I'd been here long enough to know the shortcuts through alleys, the rhythm of the L, and the way the lake wind cut through every layer of clothing no matter how many you wore. But my life had settled into autopilot. Mornings were for grad school lectures, afternoons for stocking shelves at the bookstore, and nights for falling asleep mid-paragraph with a half-read textbook propped against my chest. Then Harper Lane broke through the routine. We'd met freshman year at Northwestern. Harper was the kind of girl who walked into a room like she already owned it, even if it was just a half-empty study lounge at 2 a.m. I was quieter, the kind of person who lingered at the edge of the party until someone like Harper pulled me into the center. Our friendship had always lived in that imbalance, her boldness, my caution. When she called that Thursday night, I hadn't seen her in over a year. She'd chased a whirlwind romance to LA with a guy she swore was different. In the photos she sent back then, they looked like something out of a magazine. Rooftop drinks, weekend getaways, his arm around her waist like she was the only thing anchoring him. But then the photos stopped, the texts grew shorter, and eventually even her voice disappeared. That night, though, her voice was full of fire again. "New job, new city, new me," she said, practically buzzing through the line. "Come out and celebrate. Warehouse Art Show, Industrial District." Don't say no, I hesitated. A midterm paper loomed and I had an early bookstore shift the next morning. But Harper's invitations had never been suggestions. They were momentum. You either followed or got left behind. The warehouse looked nothing like a gallery. Dim bulbs swung from chains, graffiti wrapped the walls, and the bass from a DJ booth made the concrete floor vibrate under my sneakers. The crowd was all edges and glitter, tattoos flashing in the colored lights. laughter and shouting blending into the music. Harper found me in seconds, drink in hand, her red coat aflare in the chaos. We caught up in fragments. Her job was complicated but exciting, her apartment small but finally hers. I started to tell her about the bookstore, but I noticed she kept glancing toward the entrance. "You waiting on someone?" I asked. She gave a quick laugh, too sharp. "Just people watching." But her hand tightened around her glass. It happened fast. One moment she leaned close to shout something over the music. The next, her whole expression drained. Her eyes locked on the door. The man who stepped in wore a gray bomber jacket, tall enough to rise above the crowd. He didn't look around. His gaze found Harper like he'd been searching for her all along. Her fingers clamped onto my arm. "We have to go, now." I opened my mouth to ask why, but she was already dragging me toward a side exit between two spray-painted panels. The night air slapped cold against my face, but Harper didn't slow. We were halfway down the lane when the black SUV screeched to a stop, blocking us. Tires screamed against the cracked asphalt. The man in the bomber jacket stepped out and another man circled around the hood. Together they filled the narrow street. The bomber jacket man smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made your stomach twist. "Leaving so soon, Harper? You still owe me a conversation." His voice was calm, smooth, too practiced. My pulse spiked. Harper muttered through clenched teeth, "Don't talk. Just run." The men moved forward, closing in. One reached into his jacket. I didn't want to know what he was reaching for. I shoved Harper toward the nearest alley, sneakers slapping wet pavement as we sprinted. We ducked between dumpsters and broken pallets until the alley spilled onto a busier street, washed in the sterile glow of streetlights. The first open door was a diner, its neon sign flickering. Inside smelled like burnt coffee and fried onions. We slid into a back booth, trying to look like just two exhausted students grabbing a late-night meal. My hands trembled as I picked up the sticky menu. "Okay," I said, my voice low. "What the hell was that?" Harper's eyes stayed on the window, scanning every shadow outside before she finally spoke. "That guy, his name's Evan, I met him in LA, we dated. At first he was perfect. Knew every rooftop bar, made me feel like I was the center of the world. But when I ended it," her voice faltered. "When I ended it, he didn't let go. He just started showing up, places I hadn't told him I'd be. Friends saw him parked outside my building. I moved here to get away from him." Harper's voice cracked as she stared at her untouched coffee. "And now he's here. Guess I'm not as good at disappearing as I thought." We stayed in that diner for hours, nursing bitter refills, our eyes flicking to the door every time it creaked open. Around 2:00 a.m., we finally called a rideshare and slipped back to my apartment. I offered her my bed, but she refused, curling up on the couch with her coat still on like she was bracing for flight. Neither of us really slept. Every creak of the hallway, every muffled voice outside made us go still, listening. The next morning, I brewed coffee and tried to pretend life hadn't shifted. Harper insisted she'd handle it, that I didn't need to get involved. But the tightness in her voice betrayed her, and I knew she didn't fully believe her own words. The following days felt like carrying a live wire in my chest. I still dragged myself to class, still stacked books at work, still came home to my cramped apartment at night. But everything felt paper thin, fragile, like the real world was sliding just beneath the surface, waiting to break through. Harper made the couch her home, her suitcase wedged between the wall and the coffee table as if ready to bolt at a moment's notice. She barely left, maybe a smoke break on the fire escape, maybe a run to the corner store, and each time she returned, her eyes scanned the street like she expected the SUV to be waiting. Whenever I asked if she'd gone to the police, she brushed it off. One night, staring into a chipped mug of tea, she whispered, "You don't get it. Guys like him don't care about police reports. All it does is make them angrier." So we settled into a fragile rhythm. I left for classes in the morning and she stayed inside, usually by the window, eyes tracing the street below. She never said his name again after that first night. But then the text started. I'd hear her phone buzz, watch her shoulders stiffen as she read. She never let me see the screen. Her hands would shake, her eyes gloss over, and she'd place the phone face down on the table as though it were a venomous thing. On the fifth night, we were eating greasy takeout on the couch when her phone buzzed again. She glanced once, then locked the screen. Her food sat untouched. "I think I should go," she murmured. "Go where?" "Somewhere he can't find me." I wanted to argue, to tell her running wasn't a solution, but the truth knotted in my throat. I couldn't promise she'd be safe here. That silence felt like failure. The next morning I woke to a quiet that felt wrong. The couch was empty. The blanket she'd been using was neatly folded over the armrest. Her suitcase was gone, so was her phone charger, her jacket, her toothbrush in the bathroom. The only thing left was a sticky note on the fridge. "You're safer without me." The words sat in my chest like lead. I read them over and over as if repetition might change them into something less final. For days I convinced myself she'd text, call, or just walk back in like nothing had happened. I kept checking my phone, every unknown number making my heart lurch with equal parts hope and dread. But days bled into weeks and the silence didn't break. Sometimes walking home from class, I'd feel eyes on me. I'd glance over my shoulder, scan faces in passing cars, but I never saw the SUV again. That didn't mean it wasn't out there. It's been more than 2 years now. I haven't heard from Harper. I tell myself she got away, that she's living somewhere warm and anonymous under a new name. But sometimes late at night, I remember the fear in her eyes in that diner and wonder if she ever ran far enough. Every so often, when my phone lights up with a blocked number, I let it go to voicemail. Because if it's her, I'm not sure which truth I'll be forced to face. Sometimes loyalty means standing with your friends through anything. But sometimes the danger they carry leaks into your own life. And the bravest choice isn't holding on, it's letting go. You can love someone deeply and still step back to protect yourself. It's not betrayal. It's survival. Looking back now, I can't name the exact moment Eli Carter began to slip out of my life. We'd once been inseparable, two lanky kids from a quiet Oregon town always chasing music, adventure, and the next stupid joke that left us doubled over. When I landed a marketing job in Seattle, one of my first thoughts was, finally we'll be in the same city again. Eli had been here since college, bouncing between odd jobs and part-time work, but we'd always stayed close. At first, it was perfect. Saturday mornings meant overpriced coffee at a cafe that insisted on spinning vinyl records while we argued over which decade had the best rock albums. Sundays, we laced up our boots and took to Mount Si or Rattlesnake Ledge. Not for the views, though they were breathtaking, but for the hours of wandering talk. But by midsummer, something shifted. He started canceling plans, claiming work needed him. Yet he dodged every question about his job. His texts shortened. His grin showed less often, and when it did, it felt brittle, as if his mind was tuned to some frequency I couldn't hear. By late August, I knew something bigger was wrong. That Thursday night, his name lit up my phone. His voice was tight, unsteady. "Man, I need to talk, but not here. Meet me at Lincoln Pier, 10 o'clock? Please." I almost refused. The pier wasn't a place for heart-to-hearts. It was quiet, eerie at night, with the hum of the marina and the occasional fisherman lurking in shadows. But his tone cut through me. "Yeah," I told him. "I'll be there." When I pulled in, the air reeked of salt and diesel, the water slapping softly against the docks. Eli stood at the railing, hood up, hands buried in his sweatshirt. He didn't smile, just tipped his head toward a nearby bench. A man sat there, tall, lean, leather jacket worn thin, tapping his foot in a restless rhythm. Eli's eyes flicked to mine. "This is Mason. I owe him money. A lot of money." For a heartbeat, I thought he was pulling some prank. We'd faked band breakups before just to get a rise out of people. But the way he wouldn't meet my gaze told me this was real. Mason rose, deliberate in every step. His voice was calm but sharp enough to cut. "You're the friend," he said, as if confirming a bet. "Watch him disappear. You can help him," or my half-laugh choked in my throat. "Help him? How?" His faint smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come with us. We'll sort it out." I turned to Eli, waiting for the old smirk, the signal this was a joke gone too far. Instead, he hunched deeper, muttering words I couldn't catch. Against every instinct, I nodded. Mason's car was a dented black sedan, stinking of gasoline and stale smoke. I drove behind them through the industrial district until we stopped at an abandoned lot by the freight yards. Under a dim orange streetlight, 2 more men waited. The next minutes blurred. Raised voices, jagged accusations I couldn't untangle. Mason demanded my phone and wallet. One of the others shoved Eli hard, calling him a liar. My pulse hammered, and then it hit me. Eli hadn't called for advice. He hadn't called for comfort. He'd called because I was leverage, a bargaining chip to buy him time. The betrayal burned hotter than the fear. When one man spat on the pavement, I bolted, shoved past him, sprinted for the chain link fence. My palms tore as I hauled myself over, landing hard on the other side. Shouts and pounding footsteps followed until headlights swept across me. A rideshare slowed at the sight of my panic, and I yanked open the door, collapsing inside. By the time I could breathe, the lot was gone. I didn't know if Eli was still there or if he'd even tried to stop me. All I knew was something between us had shattered beyond repair. I didn't go home. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, insisted on taking me straight to the police once I stammered out the bare bones of what happened. He even waited in the lot until I came back out. The desk officer listened, scribbled notes, asked for descriptions. Without photos, plates, or proof, it all felt paper thin. "We'll file a report," he said gently, like someone telling a child they'd keep a broken toy just in case. By the time I finally got home, the adrenaline had bled away, leaving me hollow and shaking. I took the longest shower of my life, water pounding my neck as if it could wash off the night. But nothing scrubbed away the image of Eli standing still, watching me get surrounded and doing nothing. The next morning I texted him, "We need to talk," no reply. I called, straight to voicemail. Tried again that afternoon, sharper this time. "I'm serious." "What the hell was that?" "Call me," still nothing. By the third day I drove to his apartment. The blinds were drawn. A strip of tape with a realty company's logo clung to the doorframe, like the locks had just been changed. The landlord, a guy in a worn Seahawks hoodie, told me Eli had moved out overnight. Said he'd taken a job back east, left the keys in the mailbox. I knew he was lying, or maybe Eli had lied to him too. Either way, Eli was gone. For weeks I caught myself scanning grocery store lines, checking bus stops, even glancing into dim bars when I walked past. Part of me wanted to see him, unshaven, sheepish, ready to explain. The other part, still raw from that night, didn't know if I'd shake his hand or drive my fist into his gut. Seattle slid into fall. Damp mornings and low gray skies pressing down on the city. I buried myself in work, telling myself deadlines would keep me from obsessing over someone who had chosen to disappear. It almost worked until Mason found me. I was cutting through the quiet streets near the marina after a late meeting when I smelled cigarette smoke. He stepped from a shadowed doorway, leather jacket the same as before. "Been a while," he said with a faint smile. I froze. "Where's Eli?" He dragged slow on his cigarette, exhaling into the streetlight. "Some people don't want to be found." "That's not an answer." He tilted his head. "It's the only one you're getting." Headlights swept the street and Mason melted back into the shadows. When the car passed, he was gone. That night I couldn't sleep. His words looped in my head. Did Eli vanish by choice or because he couldn't return even if he wanted to? The next morning I filed another police report, but it felt like tossing pebbles into the ocean. They logged it, thanked me, promised nothing. I told myself to let go. Friends drift. People change. But I knew better. The city felt smaller now. Every alley and parking lot carrying the weight of a place Mason might appear again. Winter came early, Seattle's streets slick with rain colder than snow. By December, I'd stopped expecting Eli's name to light up my phone. Forgetting him was harder. He was everywhere. In the coffee shop we used to haunt, the empty space on a trail, the first chords of a song we both loved. One Friday night just before Christmas, I walked home along the waterfront. The pier smelled of salt and diesel. Just like the night everything had broken. That's when I saw him. Eli stood at the far end, hood up, hands buried in his pockets. For a second I thought about turning away. Then he lifted his head and met my eyes. I walked toward him, every step dragging up memories, each one tainted now. He didn't smile, didn't apologize, just said, "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," I shot back. He looked thinner, older somehow. "It's not safe," he said. "For you or for me? Both." I opened my mouth to demand answers. For that night, for disappearing, for using me as bait. But before I could, Mason emerged from the dark, his voice smooth as ever. "Time to go." Eli didn't fight it. He just gave me one last look, not guilt but close, and walked away with him. Their footsteps faded into the wet night. I didn't follow. After that, I stopped searching. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood. Eli hadn't been trapped. He'd chosen this path, even if it meant burning every bridge between us. The police report from that first night still sat in a manila folder in my desk drawer, a quiet reminder of how fast trust can collapse. I never added to it, never called again, never walked the marina after dark. I rebuilt piece by piece, new friends, solo hikes, concerts where I stood at the back of the crowd. But sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary day, I'd catch myself scanning faces in a station or store, wondering if Eli was out there, watching from somewhere I couldn't see. I never saw Mason again. Months later, on a rainy March afternoon, a letter landed in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper and Eli's messy scrawl. "I'm sorry, man." I burned it in the sink before I could change my mind. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who put us in harm's way. Loyalty is powerful, but it should never cost you your safety or your self-respect. You can care deeply about someone and still choose to protect yourself. The hardest part isn't walking away. It's living with the truth that the person you thought you knew was never really who they were at all. If you've ever had a best friend who felt more like an extension of you than a separate person, you know how impossible it is to say no to them. That was Noah Bennett for me. Since we were 16, he'd been the gravitational pull in my life. Skateboards clattering down cracked sidewalks, greasy tacos eaten on school days we were supposed to be in class, a garage band that produced more noise than music. Back then we were always moving, always laughing, never thinking about where we'd land. Somewhere between graduation and our mid-20s, life started dividing us. I drifted onto the slow, predictable track, stable desk job in downtown Austin, bills paid on time, dinners in front of the TV most nights. Noah went the other way. He ricocheted between construction work, delivery gigs, bartending shifts, everything temporary because he was always chasing the next big thing. He liked being untethered, and though I never said it out loud, it worried me in ways that made me sound like a parent even in my own head. We saw each other less, maybe a beer every couple of weeks, but the bond was still there, humming under everything. That's why, late one night in September 2019, when my phone buzzed and Noah's name lit the screen, I answered before the second ring. "Hey man, can you pick me up? I'm at the old rail yard. Don't ask questions, just come." There was a tightness in his voice, not exactly fear, but something just shy of it, like he was trying to keep it from breaking. "You okay?" I asked him. "Just come get me." I almost said no. I had work in the morning. But I grabbed my hoodie and my keys because history had taught me something about Noah. When he said, "Don't ask questions," it wasn't a suggestion. The rail yard was on the east side of the city, a place that looked abandoned even in daylight. At night, it felt like a set built for trouble. A single street lamp flickered weakly, and in the distance a freight train crawled past, its glow sliding over rows of rusting shipping containers. I saw movement near one of them. Noah emerged, breathing hard, clutching a black duffel bag like it was the only thing keeping him afloat. His clothes were damp, his hair plastered to his forehead, and there was a dark smear on his sleeve that my eyes kept going back to. "Drive," he said, yanking open the passenger door. I pulled away without asking where we were headed, but I couldn't ignore how his hands shook as he fumbled with the seatbelt. "You hurt?" I asked. "No. That's blood on your arm. It's not mine." The way he said it made my stomach knot. He started rattling off turns that didn't make sense, zigzagging us through neighborhoods, doubling back, avoiding main roads. Finally, I pulled over in an empty lot behind a strip mall. "Noah, tell me what's going on or I'm done." He stared straight ahead, his voice low and flat. "I messed up. I was supposed to deliver something for a guy I've been working for, not the kind of guy you say no to, but I saw what was in the package and I couldn't do it." I didn't ask what it was. His tone already told me more than I wanted to know. "They saw me leave," he added quietly. "I don't think they're going to let me walk away." At first, I told myself he was just being paranoid. Noah always assumed the worst in people. But 20 minutes later, when headlights appeared behind us and stayed there no matter which turn I took, his paranoia became mine too. "Is that them?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, not even looking back. I cut through side streets, then into a quiet residential area. The car stayed with us. We ditched mine behind a closed supermarket, grabbed the duffel and ran through backyards, crouching low to avoid motion lights. My heart pounded so hard it was like I could hear it in my ears. When we finally reached my apartment, I locked the door, killed the lights, and tried to catch my breath. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked the transcript, it was only 5 words. We know where you live. For the next week, Noah didn't leave my apartment. Curtains stayed drawn. TV stayed off. We barely spoke except for short, necessary exchanges about food or the bathroom. The silence pressed on me until it felt like the walls were leaning in. On the 8th morning, I woke to find the couch empty, the duffel gone, and no sign of forced entry, just gone. The strangest part wasn't the empty space where Noah had been. It was the quiet. For a week, even when we weren't speaking, there had been the subtle sounds of him moving around. Doors opening and closing, the fridge creaking, his footsteps pacing the living room at 3 in the morning. Now the apartment felt hollow, like the air itself had been vacuumed out. I checked my phone first, half expecting a text. Nothing. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. No social media posts, no tags, no updates. It was as if he'd been erased. That day I went to work like nothing had happened. My coworkers asked if I was feeling all right. Probably because I looked like I hadn't slept in days. I told them I was fine. That's what you do when the truth feels like a door you can't open without inviting something in. That night, I found myself replaying the rail yard in my head, the way Noah had been breathing, the blood on his sleeve, the weight of that duffel, the headlights in the rear view, the voice on the voicemail. I thought about going to the police, but what would I say? My friend was carrying something for a criminal. They followed us home. Now he's gone. That wouldn't end with help. It would end with questions I couldn't answer and doors I couldn't close again. 3 nights later, I woke from a dream where Noah was standing in my kitchen, asking me for water like nothing had happened. Only in the dream, when I turned to get a glass, he was gone again. That part felt real enough to make my chest ache when I woke. Weeks passed like that. The tension faded slowly, like a bruise changing color. But every time I heard footsteps behind me or saw a car in my mirror for too long, the old fear rushed back. I never told my parents. I never told anyone, really. It became my own sealed vault of memory, locked because opening it meant letting all the danger spill back out. It was mid-November when the postcard arrived. The front was blank white, no picture, no stamp besides the one required to mail it. My address was written in Noah's uneven handwriting. On the back, just 8 words. Better you stay away from me. It's safer. No return address. No clue where it had been sent from. I read it 3 times before setting it down. There was no date, but I could picture him writing it in some dim motel room, the duffel on the bed, eyes on the door. Maybe he'd been moving every night since he left. Maybe he was already somewhere far away. Or maybe he wasn't alive anymore. That thought crept in like a shadow and never really left. I kept the postcard in my desk drawer under a stack of utility bills and old photos. Every few months I'd take it out just to see if it felt different. It never did. It was like holding a frozen piece of time, a reminder that I'd been pulled into something I didn't understand and barely escaped. In the years since, I've learned to live with not knowing. People like to believe that if you care about someone enough, you can pull them back from wherever they're heading. But sometimes their road is already too far gone, and all you can do is watch them disappear around the bend. I still see him sometimes, not in person, but in strangers on the street, in a laugh from a passing table at a bar, in the way someone wears a baseball cap low over their eyes. I don't know if I'd even want him to reach out again. The truth might be worse than the mystery, but the thing about Noah Bennett is he's the kind of gravity you never fully escape. Some people we love are storms, beautiful, wild, unforgettable, but dangerous to stand too close to. You can care for them from a distance, but stepping into their world can mean losing your own. Sometimes survival means letting go before the sky breaks open. The night Denver changed for me didn't start with gunfire. It started with Ryan Mitchell's laugh echoing off the ambulance bay walls, bouncing between steel lockers and the faint reek of diesel. That laugh had been stitched into my life for years. We'd met back in 2011, 2 rookies sweating through paramedic training, practicing IV lines on each other's arms, learning how to sprint toward chaos while everyone else fled. Ryan was steady under pressure, the kind of guy who could crack a joke with a stabbing victim just to keep them awake while I worked the bleeding. Our friendship wasn't built on training manuals or hospital corridors alone. We'd crashed on each other's couches when relationships collapsed, split rent when money ran thin, and drowned bad shifts in dim-lit bars where exhausted first responders didn't have to explain themselves. It wasn't a friendship we thought about. It just existed, solid, dependable, like the monitor's beep in the back of the rig. By 2016, we'd been partners for 5 years. That October was unnaturally cold, the kind of cold that crawled through your coat and stayed in your bones. Late one Friday, our shift stretched past 12 hours when the dispatcher's voice crackled through. Reported shooting, multiple callers, West Point Motel. My first thought was that the West Point was bad news even in daylight. We rolled up to flashing blue and red lights, the night air stinging my cheeks as soon as I opened the door. A young man lay sprawled on the pavement in front of the motel office, hoodie soaked dark at the chest. Officers waved us forward. I dropped to my knees, slicing fabric, hunting for an entry wound. "Ryan, occlusive dressing," I said without looking up. Silence. I turned. He stood a few feet away, hands limp at his sides, eyes locked on the victim's face. Not shock, something heavier, a recognition that didn't belong here. "Ryan," I snapped, sharper. He blinked, moved toward me, handed over the dressing like his mind had been somewhere else entirely. We worked the case, but the kid was gone before we even left the scene. Back in the rig, Ryan sat in the passenger seat without a word. I let it go. Everyone handles loss differently. But his silence didn't fade. At first it was small, missed shifts, more beers after work than usual. Ryan had always blown off steam, but now it felt different. Quieter, like he was trying to bury something. He dodged my questions, changed the subject. Then, one evening in early November, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. His face looked thinner, skin pale under the porch light. "That kid," he said before I could even ask. At the motel, he was my cousin. I stepped aside. He came in, pacing my living room. "I didn't know he was running with those guys," Ryan muttered. "They know I know, but I think I know who pulled." His words dropped like stones. I opened my mouth to say we needed to go to the police, but he cut me off. "No, it'll make things worse. You have no idea what these people will do." I'd seen Ryan calm during rollover crashes and house fires, but now his voice trembled as if the cold had finally seeped into his bones. He stayed an hour, just long enough to drink half a cup of coffee and swear me to silence. When he left, I stood in the doorway long after his taillights faded, wondering what kind of trouble had just walked into my life with him. The days after Ryan's confession felt heavy, as though the air itself carried weight. At work he was half present, eyes scanning corners and alleyways as we drove. I told myself it was grief spilling into paranoia. But that theory cracked one Tuesday afternoon during a run to a cardiac arrest. We were rolling down K-Fax when I noticed a black SUV in the left lane, keeping perfect pace. Normally I wouldn't think twice, but when we turned onto Grant Street, it turned too. A few blocks later, when we rerouted around construction, it appeared again in my mirror. "See that?" I asked. Ryan glanced back without turning his head. "Yeah, ignore it." That was when I realized he'd already noticed and wasn't surprised. It didn't stop there. Over the next week, the SUV showed up twice more. Once while we were parked outside the ER, once as we returned to the station. Each time it lingered just long enough for me to be certain, then slipped into traffic like smoke. Then came the message. It was a Friday night, bitterly cold, and I was just leaving the station after paperwork when my captain's voice cut through the dark. "You're going to want to see this," he said, leading me around to the far side of the building. Spray painted across the aluminum siding in jagged red letters. "You talk, you're next." The paint was still wet, glistening under the security lights. The words seemed to hum in the frozen air, sharp as a blade. My hands went numb inside my gloves. The captain didn't press me, didn't ask. He just called the police. They came, snapped photos, asked the routine questions. Did I have enemies? Did anyone have a reason to target me? I kept my answers clipped, but inside my head Ryan's voice echoed. "They know I know." When I told him about the graffiti, his face hardened. "You went to the captain?" "I had to," I shot back. "This isn't just about you anymore. They're threatening all of us. You don't get it." His voice snapped like breaking glass. "The more attention you bring, the closer they'll get." I pushed back, and for the first time in all our years, the air between us turned hostile. We didn't ride together the next shift. We didn't talk at all. By the following week, he'd taken a leave of absence. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. His locker stood half open, boots still inside like he'd be back any minute. But he never returned. Months dragged by in silence. I told myself he was lying low somewhere safe, that one day the phone would ring. The truth came 2 years later on a bright autumn afternoon, when I spotted him across a crowded intersection. He looked older, thinner, shadows carved beneath his eyes, a plain ball cap pulled low. He didn't wave. He didn't cross. He just watched me for a moment, unreadable, and then disappeared into the flow of strangers. I don't know if he was there to warn me or to remind me of the pact we never made but somehow lived by. Silence in exchange for survival. I never saw Ryan again, but his absence became part of the city itself. A hollow in the streets I drove, a ghost in every siren. When we passed the West Point Motel, my pulse quickened. When a black SUV slid into my mirror, even for a second, the old dread stirred. Work went on. Partners came and went, each with their quirks and rhythms, but no one filled the space Ryan left. People you've shared life and death with don't get replaced. They stay in your bones. Some nights after brutal calls, I'd find myself drifting past his old locker. The boots were long gone, another medic's gear in their place, but faint scuff marks on the floor still lingered. I'd think about how quickly it all unraveled. One call, one body on the pavement, a lifetime of loyalty collapsing into a secret I couldn't explain to anyone outside of it. What gnawed at me most wasn't just the threats, it was the truth Ryan carried. If he really knew who pulled the trigger that night, then somewhere out there a murderer was walking free, and because of fear, his and eventually mine, we'd let that truth rot in the dark. I tried once to track him down. Called an old roommate, reached out to a friend from training. They all said the same thing. If he's smart, he's keeping it that way. And maybe they were right. Staying gone was survival. Staying silent was protection. For him, for me, for anyone close enough to that motel's front door. But silence corrodes. It eats at you slow and steady. Every routine call, a bar fight, a domestic, another shooting, I felt the weight of what we didn't do. The name we never spoke. The case that never touched the system. I don't know if Ryan blames me for going to the captain. I don't know if he was grateful, furious, or simply resigned. All I know is that when he turned away from me at that intersection, something closed for good. Not just our friendship, something deeper. Not because of what happened, but because of what we both chose afterward, to carry it in silence. The lesson I'm left with is sharper than I'd like to admit. Loyalty is noble, but weighed against justice, you have to decide what you can live with. Protecting someone you care about might mean letting the truth die. And the real danger is realizing you can. I still answer every call, still run toward the chaos, still do my job. But there's a part of me now that always listens for the hum of a black SUV behind us, or looks twice at the stranger in a crowd. Not from fear exactly, from the knowledge that some stories don't end. They just stop being told. It's strange how a memory can feel like it belongs to a dream, soft and hazy, until you start pulling at the details and the edges harden into something real. I remember the warmth of the air that night, heavy like a blanket. The way the light above the parking lot flickered too slowly, like a heartbeat just a little off. And the sound, footsteps echoing in a hallway where there shouldn't have been any. That trip in May 2019 was supposed to be nothing more than a much-needed escape. A long weekend away from our cramped apartment, away from the endless hum of college life in Flagstaff, away from the kind of stress that makes you feel like your bones are tired. Sophie Hale had been my best friend for 6 years by then. We met in sophomore year of high school. Two awkward kids bonded over late-night diner coffee and a shared knack for finding trouble in small towns. In college, we somehow managed to stay roommates without killing each other, though it meant tolerating the constant soundtrack of her late-night documentaries and my bad habit of eating cereal at 3 a.m. That was exactly when she found the hotel in Santa Fe online, an old roadside place off Route 285 with bright turquoise doors and a neon cactus sign that buzzed faintly, even in the photos. "It's quirky," she said, grinning over her laptop. "We'll be like Thelma and Louise without the crime spree." Our first day was exactly what we needed. We wandered through art galleries until our feet ached, bought more turquoise jewelry than either of us could justify, and sat in a hole-in-the-wall restaurant eating green chili enchiladas until the owners gently hinted it was closing time. The air was warm and carried the faint smell of mesquite smoke as we drove back to the hotel, laughing about nothing in particular. And then I saw him. He was standing under the far streetlight at the edge of the lot, hands buried in his pockets, head tilted slightly as if studying something in the dark. The flickering bulb made his outline shift like a badly cut frame in an old film reel. I wouldn't have thought much of it if not for the way his eyes seemed to lock on us as soon as we pulled in. "Do you know him?" I asked quietly. Sophie glanced his way without slowing down. "Nope. Probably just another guest." We got to our room, locked the door, and pulled the curtains tight. Sophie flipped on the TV, her voice casual as she told me not to start imagining things, but something about the way his gaze had lingered stuck with me, like he wasn't just looking but recognizing. It was close to midnight when I heard the footsteps. They were slow at first, then nearer, deliberate. Sophie muted the TV. We both sat there waiting. The sound stopped right outside our door. Then came the knock, not a polite tap, but a single heavy thud against the wood. I went to the peephole. The man from the parking lot stood perfectly still, eyes fixed forward. He didn't sway. He didn't shift. He just waited. We didn't answer. After a long moment, he turned and walked away. The sound of his footsteps faded, but it didn't feel like he'd gone far. The next morning, we went down for breakfast in the small lobby. I spotted him immediately, sitting alone by the window, stirring his coffee in slow circles but never lifting it to his mouth. Sophie avoided looking at him, but I couldn't help noticing the way his eyes followed us as we walked past. Not a glance, a steady, unblinking track until we stepped outside. We tried to enjoy the day, wandering through museums and lingering over street food, but I found myself checking over my shoulder more than once. No one was there, but that didn't make me feel any better. When we came back that evening, the hallway to our room was empty. We had just reached our door when I heard it again, footsteps behind us, fast and deliberate. Sophie fumbled with the key card. I turned just enough to see him. He was closing the distance, his eyes locked on us like they'd been in the parking lot. We slipped inside, the door latching just as he reached it. Another single knock, then silence. The front desk clerk didn't seem particularly concerned when we called. "Ma'am," she said, her voice tinny through the phone. "Unless he tries to enter your room, there's not much we can do. He's probably just another guest." I looked at Sophie, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, the remote still in her hand, her brows knit together. "What if he's not?" I asked the clerk, a pause. "Then we'll make a note in the system." We hung up, neither of us feeling better. Sophie tried to distract herself with some cooking show, but I found myself staring at the narrow gap between the bottom of the curtains and the carpet. The light outside shifted occasionally when someone passed by. Every time my heart jumped. That night I barely slept. Around 2 out in the morning, I heard the faint creak of the floorboards in the hallway. Not walking, just one sound like someone shifting their weight. Then nothing. I told myself it was just the building settling, but I stayed awake until the sun edged over the blinds. The next day we started moving like shadows, timing our exits to the rhythm of other people's footsteps. If we heard voices in the corridor, we waited until they faded before opening our door. We stopped taking the elevator and used the narrow stairwell closest to the lobby, its paint chipped and damp from years of use. It was exhausting, but the thought of seeing him again in some quiet stretch of carpeted hallway was worse. By the third day, we were counting down the hours until checkout. We planned to leave before dawn, but that evening we made the mistake of staying out just a little too long. When we returned, the parking lot was dimmer than usual. 2 of the overhead lights had gone out, leaving pockets of darkness between the cars. Sophie quickened her pace, the keycard already in her hand. I was right behind her when I heard it again. Footsteps. This time they weren't slow. They were fast, coming closer, pounding softly against the pavement like a heartbeat. We both turned. He was there, moving quickly, no expression on his face, like a shadow with a purpose. We reached the door, shoved it open, and slammed it shut behind us. My hands shook as I slid the security latch into place. The knock came immediately, harder than before. Then silence. We didn't sleep at all that night. We sat up with the TV on low, half expecting another knock, the flickering screen throwing pale light across the room. But there was nothing. just the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional car passing on the highway. By morning, we were ready to leave. We packed in silence, each of us moving like we'd been awake for days. When we carried our bags to the lobby, the clerk at the desk glanced up and said, "Checking out early?" I wanted to tell her everything, the knocks, the footsteps, the way he just stood there, but the words felt heavy and useless in my throat. Outside, the air was already warm. We loaded our bags into the car. Sophie shut the trunk, then froze. He was leaning against a silver sedan at the far end of the lot, arms crossed loosely. This time he was smiling. Not a wide grin, just a small, knowing curl of the lips. "Have a safe trip," he said. We didn't answer. We got in the car, locked the doors, and drove. It wasn't until we hit the highway that Sophie spoke. I don't think he was a guest. Neither did I. We drove the first 20 miles in silence, the desert flattening out around us, the morning sun turning everything gold. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that silver sedan trailing us, but the road behind was empty. It wasn't until we stopped for gas near Espanola that we spoke again. Sophie leaned against the car, arms folded, eyes scanning the lot. "Do you think he knew what room we were in?" she asked. I thought about the knocks. Always stopping at our door. Never anyone else's. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think he knew." The rest of the drive to Flagstaff felt longer than the trip out had. Every roadside motel and quiet parking lot made me uneasy. It wasn't just fear of him following us. It was the realization that there are people who can slip into your life so quietly, without breaking a single law you can prove, and still make you feel hunted. When we got home, I double-checked the locks before I even unpacked. That night, Sophie called her older brother, a police officer in Phoenix, and told him the whole story. He didn't laugh it off. "If it happens again," he said, "call the police right away. Keep records. Times, dates, everything." Weeks went by and nothing happened. No strange knocks. No unfamiliar cars parked outside our place. But every time I walked down a long hallway, in an office, a hotel, even the school library, I caught myself listening for footsteps behind me. Sophie and I never stayed in a budget motel again. We read reviews more carefully, checked parking lots before unloading our bags, and asked for rooms close to the lobby. It wasn't paranoia so much as realizing how thin the line is between harmless and dangerous, and how often you can't tell which side someone is on until it's too late. Sometimes I wonder who he was, if he really was just another guest. But I keep coming back to one thing. He never had luggage. Not once. I still hear those footsteps sometimes, even in my dreams. Slow at first, then faster, closing the gap. And I always wake up before the knock. Some people you meet by chance. Others seem to find you on purpose. The hard truth is you may never know which kind you're dealing with until you're already too close. Trust the feeling in your gut even if you can't explain it. Safety doesn't always come from being right. Sometimes it comes from acting before you're sure. I always thought silence would save me. After the breakup, I told myself that all I needed was quiet. No arguments bleeding through the walls. No half-finished bottles of wine turning to vinegar on the counter. No ghost of a man's voice asking if I was okay, when we both knew I wasn't. So when the listing for Riverside Apartments appeared online, a modest, one-bedroom on the east side of Portland with creaky floors and river fog that smelled like cold stone, I signed the lease within an hour. The place wasn't much, but it felt like a reprieve. The hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and old carpet. The mailboxes still had brass labels from the 70s. My unit, 2A, faced the courtyard, where a single maple tree leaned toward the sky like it was tired of standing. On my first evening, I unpacked the kitchen boxes and left the blinds half open so the amber glow from the parking lot spilled inside. "New tenant?" a voice called behind me. I turned to find an older woman balancing a laundry basket on her hip. "Yes, Lena Morell," I said. "Mrs. Trout," she introduced herself, breathing lightly. "Landlord. Welcome to Riverside. The building is quiet and primarily inhabited by retirees. You'll like it here." That was precisely what I wanted. Quiet. She pointed toward the unit across the hall. "That's Mr. Keenan, 2B, night photographer. Keeps to himself but a good man. Helps tenants move out when the stairs get too much for them. I smiled politely. Sounds like a gentleman. Oh, he is, she said, almost proud. Been here longer than I have. The first time I saw him was 3 days later. I was carrying groceries up the stairs when a calm voice said, "Need a hand with that?" He appeared from the dim hallway. Mid-40s maybe, tall, with salt and pepper hair combed back neatly. He wore a wool coat even though it was mild outside and smelled faintly of cedar and something chemical, like film developer. "Thank you," I said, shifting the bags. He took 2 from me with practiced ease. "You're Lena, right?" "Apartment 2A, I blinked. "Yes, how did you—" He gestured to the mailboxes. "Saw your name earlier. Always good to meet the new neighbor." Inside, he set the bags on my counter. His movements were deliberate, almost graceful, like someone conscious of every inch of space he occupied. When I offered coffee, he declined. "I only drink at night," he said lightly. "Keeps me awake for work." "What kind of photography do you do?" "Night work," he repeated. "Cities asleep. Lights that don't know they're being watched." Something about the phrasing lodged in my chest, but I laughed softly. "That's poetic." He smiled. Thin, symmetrical. A smile rehearsed for the lens. When he left, the faint scent of cedar lingered. Days bled together. I worked remote design contracts from my couch, ordered Thai takeout too often, and tried to convince myself that solitude was healing. At night, I'd read until 2 or 3 a.m., my lamp casting a warm circle across the bed. Sometimes I'd hear the faint creak of floorboards from the hall, or the hum of pipes when someone showered late. Ordinary sounds, I told myself. One night, as I washed dishes, a soft knock came at the door. I opened it to Mr. Keene holding a small package. "This was left by the mailroom for 2A, he said. "Thanks." I glanced at the label. It was mine. He hesitated, as if wanting to say more. "Do you like music, Ms. Morell?" he asked suddenly. "I guess so." He smiled faintly. "I heard you playing Mazzy Star last night." "Into Dust, beautiful song." My stomach tightened. I had played that song once, alone, barely loud enough for me to hear. "You must have good ears," I managed. "Old walls," he said, tapping the frame gently. "They share everything." After he left, I turned off my lamp earlier than usual. But at 3:07 a.m., I woke suddenly, heart pounding, certain that something had clicked in the dark. Weeks passed. Portland's autumn bled gray. Rain hissed softly against the windows like static. I convinced myself I was imagining things. The faint shutter sound at night, the sense that someone was awake whenever I was. Still, small things began to unsettle me. My doormat slightly crooked each morning. My toothbrush was damp when I hadn't used it. The cat, Miso, stared at the vent above the bed and hissed until his tail puffed like a brush. One evening, I met Mr. Keene again in the hall. He was locking his door, carrying a tripod. "Working tonight?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. "Always." He tilted his head, studying me. "You leave your lamp on till 3:07 every morning." My throat tightened. "How would you know that?" He smiled mildly. "The courtyard windows reflect your room. Light patterns are hard to miss." "Right," I murmured, retreating toward my door. As it shut, I caught his whisper, too low to be certain, something like, "Keep the light on." That night, I unplugged the lamp entirely. By November, I was checking locks twice before bed. My friend said I needed therapy, not another move. "You're hypervigilant," my friend Mara said over the phone. "Breakups mess with your sense of safety." Maybe she was right. Yet the sounds persisted. The faint click-click from somewhere beyond the walls and the whir of something mechanical starting and stopping. One afternoon, Mrs. Trout knocked with rent receipts. I hesitated, then asked, "Has Mr. Keene ever had complaints? Anything odd?" Her brow furrowed. "Good man. Pays on time. Keeps to himself. Does he have access to maintenance keys?" She laughed softly. "He's helped people move out, sure. Folks trust him." Trust. The word tasted wrong. That night, Miso vanished. I searched every corner, every stairwell, and every vent. The hallway echoed my own voice calling his name. Mr. Keene's door remained closed, light visible under it like a thin golden wound. At 2 a.m., I slid a note under his door, "Have you seen my cat?" By morning, the note was gone, but no reply came. Sleep fractured into fragments. I'd drift off only to wake with the sense that someone had just left the room. My phone buzzed twice around 3 a.m. Unknown numbers, voicemail messages filled only with soft breathing. I went to the police. The officer's expression hovered between patience and disbelief. Any evidence he's entered your apartment? No, but things move. My toothbrush. Could be maintenance, cleaning staff, even humidity, he interrupted. You mentioned sounds of a camera. Without proof, there's not much we can do. On the way home, fog rolled in off the river, swallowing the streetlights until everything looked underwater. When I reached my door, an envelope sat on the welcome mat. Inside, a Polaroid of my own front door taken from the courtyard. The blinds were half open. My shadow is visible behind them. I ran to Mrs. Trout's unit, pounding until she opened bleary-eyed. Did anyone deliver this? She frowned at the photo. Strange. Maybe kids? Kids don't use Polaroids. Her eyes softened. Honey, Riverside's old, but it's safe. Maybe you're just... I'm not imagining this. My voice cracked. She patted my arm awkwardly. I'll have the locks checked. She never did. The following nights blurred into each other. Rain, static. The faint hum through the vent was like whispering air. I began sleeping on the couch. TV low for comfort. Around 2:30 one night, I caught motion in the dark. Just a shimmer, as if light bent wrong near the vent. When I approached, the air was cooler there, metallic. I crouched, flashlight trembling, and something glinted deep inside. A tiny glass circle reflecting my eye back at me. Panic surged. I unscrewed the grate with shaking fingers and found a small black device wired to a cable that disappeared into the wall. A lens. I carried it straight to the police station. The same officer from before examined it. Looks like a microcam, he admitted. Where exactly was it? Behind my bedroom vent, he scribbled notes. We'll check the adjacent units. Hours later, they called me back. The camera was connected through the wall to apartment 2B, but the unit's empty. Empty? What do you mean? Mr. Keene moved out yesterday. Left the key in the drop box. I felt the world tilt. Did you find anything else? The officer's expression shifted. Several tapes labeled with apartment numbers. One marked Lena Week 9. We're cataloging them. I signed a report with trembling hands, then packed everything I owned by sunrise. When I left, the hallway seemed to breathe. Each step felt watched. I relocated to a short-term rental in Northeast Portland. New locks, second-floor unit, no shared vents. For the first time in months, I slept without the lamp. Still, quiet carried weight. I'd wake expecting the click, the hum, and the whisper. It wasn't there, but absence has its own sound. 2 weeks later, a small brown package appeared on my new doorstep. No return label, no postage stamp. Just my name written in neat black ink. Inside was a single Polaroid. I'm asleep in my new bed, clutching that very photograph. And in the darkness behind me, reflected faintly in the window glass, stands a figure holding a camera, face half hidden, smile perfectly still. I woke up to the sound of my own teeth grinding. That dry, scraping click that used to make Owen laugh. He'd call it my midnight Morse code. Now it just echoes inside my skull, dull and endless, like something trying to chew its way out. The apartment feels smaller since he died. The walls breathe differently, heavier somehow, as if the air learned grief too. It's been 11 months since the crash, though it still smells like burnt rubber whenever I pass the intersection on 5th. I keep thinking I should move, but packing his things feels like killing him all over again. I still use his toothbrush for cleaning jewelry. I still talk to him sometimes, like he's in the next room, mostly apologies. People said therapy would help me learn to smile again. I told myself the day I first met Dr. Pierce. They were wrong. That afternoon, I was sitting in my car outside his office, watching raindrops race down the windshield. My jaw ached, locked tight as always. The pain had a rhythm now, a pulse that synced with guilt. I almost didn't go in, but then I saw his name etched in brass beside the door. Dr. Harlan Pierce, Ph.D., grief counseling, emotional recovery, behavioral reconstruction. Behavioral reconstruction. The phrase felt surgical. Maybe that's why I trusted him. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of sandalwood and antiseptic, clean but human. No receptionist, just soft piano playing from somewhere unseen. The lamp in the corner cast a warm cone of amber light, and I remember thinking it looked like late afternoon forever frozen in a jar. Then he appeared. "Ms. Bell?" His voice was calm, low, like the start of a prayer. "I'm Dr. Pierce, come in." He was older, 60 maybe. Gray hair combed neatly back, pressed shirt, corduroy jacket. But it was his eyes that stayed with me. Kind, steady, the sort of eyes that made you want to confess things. I followed him into his office, past walls lined with books and photographs of smiling people. They looked genuine, not stock photo genuine, but lived-in genuine. We sat across from each other. He didn't open a file or ask for forms. He just watched me for a moment. "You've been carrying something heavy," he said. I nodded. "My husband. The crash." He raised a hand gently. "You don't need to rehearse it. Just breathe." That was our first exercise, breathing. He had me inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. I tried, but my jaw resisted, trembling with a dull ache. He noticed. "You hold grief here," he said, touching his own chin. "In the mouth. People think it's the heart, but no. Grief settles where words die." I didn't understand what he meant, but it sounded true enough. Over the weeks, our sessions became ritual. Tuesdays and Fridays at 5. I'd sit in the same chair, stare at the same framed photo of a coastline behind him, and try not to think of Owen's face through shattered glass. Dr. Pierce would guide me through breathing, posture, then, eventually, smiling. "We'll rebuild it," he'd say. "Your smile. Muscles remember what the soul forgets." Sometimes he brought a camera. "Progress tracking," he explained when I hesitated. "Visual therapy helps quantify healing." He always asked permission, but his voice carried that fatherly certainty that made refusal feel childish. He'd angle the light, adjust the focus, then instruct me softly. "Now show me how you used to smile." The flash was gentle, diffused by the lamp's amber glow. But each click echoed in me like a tiny fracture. Weeks passed. My co-workers at the dental office noticed I talked less. Even the hum of the polishing drill felt distant. Patients' mouths became abstract puzzles, teeth, gums, enamel. I moved through them mechanically, gloved hands, mint paste, rinse, repeat. But every time I glimpsed my reflection in the mirror, my lips seemed slightly off-center, stretched, as if they'd been practicing without me. Dr. Pierce started using phrases like emotional necrosis and muscular atrophy of joy. He said my expressions were stiffening into memorials. "I want to help you reclaim authenticity," he told me once. "Let me see what happiness looks like when it hurts." He tilted my chin upward, fingers cool but firm. "Wider," he whispered. "There, perfect." When the flash went off, I felt something inside me flinch, not from pain exactly, but recognition. That night I dreamt of mirrors filled with other faces wearing my smile. It was late October when I first lost time. I'd gone home after a session, lay down on the couch, and woke up 3 hours later with gauze in my mouth. My jaw throbbed, metallic taste flooding my tongue. I spat into the sink, pink water, faint threads of white. I told myself it was sleepwalking. I'd probably clenched too hard, maybe bitten something. But then I found the disposable gloves on my kitchen counter, crumpled and powdered. I don't own gloves. At our next session, I tried to bring it up casually. "I had a weird dream," I said. "Felt like dental work." Dr. Pierce smiled faintly. "Dreams are how the body rehearses healing. Did you feel relief afterward?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I just felt empty." He nodded as if that were the correct answer. Then he adjusted the camera. "This week," he said, "we'll focus on symmetry." He dimmed the overhead lights and turned on a soft lamp near my face. The light hummed faintly. He positioned a mirror beside me. "Look at yourself," he said. "Don't analyze, just observe. What do you see?" "My mouth looks wrong," I whispered. "In what way?" "Like it's remembering something I forgot." He smiled approvingly. "Good, that's awareness. Now let's fix it." The click of the camera sounded like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. By December, I stopped visiting friends. I couldn't bear how they stared at me like I was unfinished. My best friend Lisa asked if I was losing weight. My cheeks felt tight all the time, skin stretched. Even yawning hurt. I brushed it off, told her stress was chewing me alive. At night, I caught myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror for long stretches, practicing smiles that didn't belong to me. Sometimes the corners of my lips twitched like they were following someone else's rhythm. That's when the email started. From CarPierceReconstructionClinic.com. Subject, Lesson 3, Grief as Form. Attachment, image en danger. The photo was of me, mouth slightly open, eyes half-lidded. The caption read, Improvement visible. I deleted it instantly, assuming it was some automated progress tracker. But they kept coming. Lesson 4, Lesson 5, each with attachments. Close-ups of my teeth, my gums, the curve of my lips under different lighting. Notes scribbled in red ink along the edges. Tension reduced. Smile memory stabilized. Corner ratio extended 1.2 kilometers. I stopped opening them, but curiosity always wins over fear. By Lesson 7, I couldn't recognize myself. My smile looked painted on, too wide, too obedient. The night it all broke, snow was falling in heavy sheets. The city muffled itself, sound absorbed by white. My apartment felt colder than usual, and when I turned on the bathroom light, the mirror fogged over instantly. I wiped it with my sleeve. For a second, I thought someone else was standing behind me. My reflection lingered longer than it should have. The next day, I went to the clinic without an appointment. The receptionist's desk was still empty as always. I followed the faint scent of antiseptic down the hallway until I reached Dr. Pierce's door. It was unlocked. Inside, the lights were dim. No piano music this time. The air smelled metallic, almost like blood and developer fluid, the kind we used in dental x-rays. I called out his name. No answer. Then I saw the wall. Hundreds of photographs pinned in neat rows. Mouths, all mouths, mine at different angles, stages, expressions. Smiles too wide, gums exposed, teeth gleaming under harsh light. Each labeled in red ink. Week 2, minimal response. Week 5, encouraging strain. Week 9, elasticity achieved. My knees gave out. I pressed a hand to my jaw. Behind me, a door creaked open. Beautiful, isn't it? His voice was calm, almost tender. Dr. Pierce stepped out from a shadowed corner wearing latex gloves dusted with powder. His glasses caught the lamplight, reflecting my own distorted grin from the photographs. Why are you doing this? I managed. He looked genuinely puzzled. Doing what, Nora? You asked for healing. I gave it form. My throat closed. You've been operating on me. Not operating, he corrected gently. Refining. You couldn't smile anymore. So I helped your body remember. He reached for a folder on the desk and opened it, revealing sketches of a human mouth stretched beyond its natural curve, stitched at the corners. Smiles fade, but I've designed one that endures. I stumbled back. My jaw pulsed with heat. He sighed softly. Don't be afraid. You'll thank me. Permanence is mercy. I ran. The hallway warped as I moved, lights flickering, each bulb humming a different pitch. The exit door was locked. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. I could taste iron. Behind me, his footsteps were unhurried. You'll tear the stitches, he said. You'll ruin everything. I don't remember how I escaped. Only the sound of breaking glass, the rush of cold air, the city swallowing me whole. It's been 6 months since that night. I can't close my mouth. The corners of my lips are tethered too high, skin puckered into permanent mockery. The stitches dissolved weeks ago, but the scars remain, glossy and tight. Speaking hurts. Eating is worse. I drink through straws. I told the police everything, but Dr. Pierce vanished. Clinic emptied, records erased. The email address stopped working. Sometimes, though, my inbox pings with new messages. No sender, no subject line. Just attachments. Lesson 8, Grin Forever. Lesson 9, Maintenance Required. When I open them, the screen flickers. My reflection catches in the black gloss between frames, smiling wider than before. I tried smashing every mirror in the apartment, but reflections find their way back in spoons, windows, even puddles, and every one of them smiles first. At night, I dream of him adjusting lights again, whispering, Wider, Nora, wider. I waked to the sound of my own teeth clicking, like a metronome marking time for a smile that refuses to end. I don't see patients anymore. The clinic fired me after too many complaints about my unnerving demeanor. They said children cried when I leaned over them. One kid told his mother, "She's wearing someone else's face." I wanted to explain, but my mouth won't form the words, so I just smiled. Now I keep the curtains drawn. I've taped over every reflective surface. Still, I feel watched, like a lens has replaced the air around me. Sometimes the TV turns itself on, static shaping into faint outlines of my grin. And once, just once, I heard his voice through it. "You're finally healing, Nora. I made sure your smile will never fade again." The screen flickered. Then an image appeared, me, sitting exactly where I was, the same angle, same light. Only in the photo I wasn't blinking. I unplugged the TV. It stayed on for another 30 seconds. Now the hum never stops. Somewhere between the walls, behind the drywall or the vents, a faint electrical buzz sings like a camera warming up. Sometimes when I walk by the bathroom door, I hear the faint click of a shutter. I tell myself it's nothing. But each morning there are fresh prints slid under my door, high-gloss paper, the smell of developer still wet. My face caught mid-smile, annotated in red. Perfection sustained. I've stopped trying to hide. Maybe he's right. Maybe this is what healing looks like when it hurts. When I laugh, if that's what it is, the sound cracks dryly through the room, echoing against the walls like something rehearsed. And in that echo, beneath the brittle sound, I hear him whisper again, wider. I used to love working night shifts. The quiet felt clean, predictable, like the world was finally still enough to breathe. St. Meridian Psychiatric Hospital in Savannah, Georgia had that peculiar hum at night, fluorescent bulbs buzzing like trapped flies, distant air vents rattling, and the occasional echo of something shifting in the dark that no one wanted to name. I told myself I liked it because quiet meant control. But now I think quiet was just the absence of witnesses. My name is Ava Donnelly, 35, night nurse, 12 years at St. Meridian. The hospital sits at the edge of the city, where the Spanish moss thickens and the marsh air smells faintly of rot and sea salt. From the parking lot, you can see the water shimmer behind the tree line, reflecting the sodium yellow lights that never quite stay steady. I used to drink coffee on the front steps before my shift started, watching the glow flicker like the place was exhaling. Inside, everything was routine. Temperature checks, chart updates, meds. The walls were institutional beige, the kind of color that flattens everything it touches. I knew which tiles creaked and which patients faked sleep. Night shifts attract a certain kind of person, those who like silence or those running from something. I told myself I was the first kind. Room 313 was always locked. The sign on the door read, "Under evaluation." It had been that way since I started. Sometimes new hires asked what was inside, and the older nurses would just shrug. "Storage," they'd say. But the key never worked in its lock, and the small observation window was always covered from the inside. Once, years ago, I saw a light flicker under the door, just once, but no one else noticed. I convinced myself it was just reflection from the hallway. 2 months ago, they admitted Clara Holt, 24, history of self-harm, personality disorder, and what Dr. Kelman called persistent identity delusions. Her chart noted scars along both arms, like tally marks climbing toward her shoulders. When I first met her, she was sitting cross-legged on the bed, eyes wide and unblinking, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Evening, Clara," I said softly, checking her vitals. She smiled. Too easily. "You're Ava," she said. "I've been waiting to meet you." There's something about hearing your name from a stranger's mouth in that kind of tone. It lands differently. Like they already know the rest of your story. I forced a small laugh. "Well, that's convenient. I'll be your night nurse this week." Her head tilted slightly, eyes flicking to the left like she was following a thought. "You were humming when you came in." "I don't think I was." "You used to hum when your mom ironed," she said. "Remember? The sound of fabric crackling? You'd sit on the floor and match your breathing to hers. The pen slipped in my hand. What did you just say? Clara blinked once. You look tired, she said, voice softer. Don't stay too long in the halls tonight. It watches you when you do. After that, I told myself she was perceptive. Some patients are. They read faces, pick up cues, mirror back whatever they think you want to hear. It's how they anchor themselves. That's all it was. Still, when I got home that morning, I noticed the faint humming sound coming from my apartment. My mom used to hum that exact melody. I hadn't thought of it in years. I shut off the lights and stood in the dark, trying to remember if I'd ever done it in front of Clara. The next night, she was waiting, sitting upright, smiling like a child expecting praise. I couldn't sleep, she said when I entered. Too many footsteps. None of us sleep much here, I said. I do, she replied. When I'm not pretending. Pretending what? Her eyes didn't blink. To be you. I tried to laugh again, but it came out flat. You're not me, Clara. Not anymore, she said. But I remember it. The color of your walls, the smell of the candles you light before bed. Cedarwood and vanilla. My throat went dry. I hadn't mentioned that to anyone. Who told you that? You did, she said simply. Before. That night, I stayed later than usual, rechecking her chart. It was thin. Admission notes, psych eval, a transfer authorization from another facility in Atlanta. But the transfer form was missing a signature. The line where the attending physician's name should have been was blank. At 3:17 a.m., the corridor lights flickered. I heard a door click open. Room 313's door. The sound was unmistakable. I froze. It was down the hall behind the nurse's station, that quiet stretch of linoleum that always smelled faintly of disinfectant and mildew. I called out, "Maintenance? Anyone back there?" No response. Just that steady hum of the lights. I walked slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. The door to 313 was closed, sign crooked. For a second I thought I saw movement under the frame, like someone shifting their feet. Then nothing. When I turned around, Clara was standing halfway down the hall. Her gown hung loosely, her arms bare. Her smile was still there, faintly lit by the flicker above her. "You shouldn't check on that room," she said. "Clara, how did you get out?" "I didn't," she whispered. "You did." By the time I blinked, she was gone. I found her back in her bed 5 minutes later. Eyes closed, heart rate normal. The restraints were still clipped. The following morning, I mentioned it to Dr. Kelman. He frowned, scribbling something in his notes. "You've been working extra shifts, haven't you?" "Yeah, but lack of sleep can make the mind play tricks, Ava. These patients, they absorb energy. Project it back. It's transference." She knew things she couldn't. She's good at reading people. That's what her file says. It's what keeps her stable. Stable. I didn't feel stable. The next week blurred together. Sleep felt shallow, dreamlike. I'd wake up at home to find my bedside lamp turned on, or my toothbrush moved. Once my phone camera was open in the middle of the night, recording nothing but my empty living room for 47 minutes. I started forgetting small things. Passwords, shifts, where I parked my car. My coworkers noticed. "You okay, Ava?" They'd ask. "You look pale." One night, I found my own handwriting on a patient chart I hadn't touched. The signature line read Ava Donnelly, RN, neat and looping, but I hadn't filled that form. The date was 2 days ahead. When I confronted Clara, she smiled like she'd been waiting. "I'm helping," she said. "You're falling behind. Stop touching my files. They're not yours." "Then whose are they?" She leaned close, voice low enough that I could smell the sterile salt of her skin. "Mine. I just borrowed your name for a while." The tension in my chest turned to something sharp. "You need rest, Clara." She nodded. "We both do." That night at exactly 2:06 a.m., the hospital lost power. The emergency lights failed to come on. For the first time in 12 years, St. Meridian was completely dark. I grabbed my flashlight, heading for the generator room. The beam shook as I moved. Every step echoed back at me, doubled. When I passed 313, the door was ajar. The smell hit first, metallic, wet. My light found the outline of someone crouched inside. "Clara?" Her head snapped toward me, eyes catching the beam like glass. She was barefoot, the hem of her gown soaked. Something dark dripped from her fingers. "You're late for rounds," she whispered. "Room 313's waiting." My breath caught. "You shouldn't be here." "I never left," she said. "You did." When I stepped forward, the room came into focus, walls covered in medical charts, notes pinned like trophies. Every one of them had my name on it, my ID photo, my handwriting, my psych evaluations, pages upon pages of assessments written in looping, perfect cursive, each signed Dr. Clara Holt. The flashlight slipped, beams scattering across the floor where my own photograph lay torn in half. The part with my eyes was missing. I ran. I don't even remember the sound of my footsteps, just the rhythm of breathing, ragged and uneven, echoing behind me, though I was alone. When maintenance restored the power, room 313 was empty. No blood, no files, no patient. The official report called it a misfiled transfer. Dr. Kelman told me to take a few weeks off. "Get some rest, Ava," he said kindly. "We'll sort it out." But he didn't see what I saw in the security footage they pulled. At 2:06 a.m., during the blackout, the hallway camera caught a brief flicker, one frame of movement before the feed cut. It wasn't Clara walking into 313, it was me. I don't remember doing it. Now, weeks later, I'm back at work. Everyone pretends nothing happened. Room 313's sign has been replaced, under evaluation. The door stays locked. But the night charts still get filled in, perfect handwriting, dated, signed. My name. Sometimes I find notes I don't remember writing. Patient exhibits dissociative behavior. Mirror responses noted. And before dawn, when the lights flicker like they always do, I see my reflection in the window. It blinks a heartbeat before I do. I don't check room 313 anymore, because I know who's inside. I thought it was the easiest job I'd ever take. Babysitting overnight one child, $150 in cash. That was the ad. No background check, no interview, just a single line in an online job board for Lancaster locals. I'd scrolled past dozens of scams that day, my thumb raw from swiping, but something about that post stuck. Maybe it was the bluntness of it, or maybe it was because I was 3 weeks late on rent and desperate enough to ignore the warning signs. I'm Mara Quinn, 23, college dropout, part-time barista, full-time disappointment to my parents. The day I got the job, it was raining, thin gray drizzle that blurred everything. The world felt washed out, quiet. I took that as a sign things were calming down. I was wrong. The address was on a cul-de-sac near the edge of town, one of those neighborhoods that looked new but already felt abandoned. Lawns too neat, houses too similar, even the streetlights buzzed in unison, a sterile, synchronized hum. The Halbrook house was the last one on the lane, 2 stories, pale yellow siding, windows covered with heavy drapes. Light seeped through in dull, rectangular patches. The porch smelled like lemon polish and old rain. When Mrs. Halbrook opened the door, she was already holding the contract. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked like someone trying to remember how to be polite. "You must be Mara," she said, voice tight and rehearsed. "Come in." Her home was immaculate. No clutter, no warmth, a muted palette of beige and gray, the kind of silence that made you aware of your own breathing. There was a faint metallic tang in the air, like a penny pressed to your tongue. I wiped my shoes, nervous. "Thank you for having me." She nodded but didn't smile again. "The job's simple. My son Eli is 6. He's sensitive. He doesn't sleep well. You'll stay until morning." She handed me the contract. I skimmed it, expecting the usual liability nonsense, but one line stood out in bold type. "Do not let him see himself in the mirror." I looked up. "Is this some kind of sensory thing?" Her jaw twitched. "Just follow it. No exceptions." There was no humor in her tone. Just the kind of brittle authority people get when they've been scared too long. I nodded, signing without asking more. $150. One night. How bad could it be? Eli was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the rug, stacking blocks with slow, deliberate care. Pale kid. Blonde hair so light it looked silver under the lamp. His eyes were gray too, washed out, almost colorless. "Hi, Eli," I said softly. "I'm Mara. Your mom asked me to hang out with you tonight." He didn't look up. "You shouldn't stay after the moon comes." I laughed nervously. "Why's that?" His fingers tightened around the block. "Because he comes then." I waited for the punchline. It didn't come. "Who's he?" Eli lifted his chin slightly and pointed toward the hallway mirror. A tall, old-fashioned piece of furniture with a carved wooden frame, the glass slightly warped. My reflection looked stretched wrong. I told myself he was just a kid with nightmares. Maybe his dad left and he was some stand-in for fear. The usual story. Mrs. Halbrook came down the stairs with her purse in hand. He's already had dinner. No sweets after 9. Keep him upstairs after midnight. Got it. And don't cover the mirror. Her words caught me off guard. Wait, the rule said not to let him see himself. So she hesitated. Just don't touch it. Leave it how it is. Before I could ask more, she was gone. Her car disappeared into the fog. For the first few hours, it was normal enough. Eli and I played cards, watched a cartoon, and by 10, he was yawning. I tucked him into bed, left a nightlight on, and scrolled my phone downstairs until the house grew still. That was when I noticed it. The sound. Whispering. It started faint, like a TV on in another room. I muted my phone, listening. It was coming from the hallway. Eli's voice. I climbed the stairs, heart tight in my chest. Eli? He was sitting on the floor by his doorway, facing the mirror. Hey, I said gently. It's late, buddy. He didn't turn. His lips were moving, whispering softly. I realized he was repeating something, his own words echoed back a half-second later. But the second voice wasn't his. It was lower. Eli, come on, let's go back to bed. He finally turned toward me. His eyes reflected the hallway light strangely, like there was glass between us. He says you shouldn't talk to me, he murmured. Who says that? The one behind you. I spun around. The hall was empty, just my reflection in the mirror. My reflection and something behind it. The glass looked fogged, like breath from the inside. I stepped forward, reaching out to wipe it, but before I touched it, Eli screamed, a sound so sharp it made me flinch. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Eli! I called. I grabbed him, clutching him close. He was trembling so hard his teeth chattered. I could hear movement from the hallway. Soft, deliberate steps that weren't mine. When my phone's flashlight came on, I pointed it toward the mirror. For a moment, I saw hands pressed against the glass. My hands, but they were inside. Pale, reversed, fingertips smeared against the surface as if something was trying to get out. The air felt heavy, thick with static. The light flickered again. The hands were gone. I scooped Eli up and ran upstairs to his room, slamming the door. I called Mrs. Halbrook. She answered immediately, no greeting. Don't move him, she said. Do not move him. What's happening? There's someone. Don't let him near a reflection. He'll follow it. Just stay still. Keep your eyes shut until morning. Her voice cracked on the last word. Then the line went dead. I held Eli close, whispering that it was okay, that it was just a bad dream. But the boy didn't blink. He just stared at the wall and whispered, "It's not a dream for him." The rest of the night stretched like wet paper. Every creak sounded like breathing. At some point, I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, sunlight was leaking through the curtains. The mirror in the hallway was cracked through the center like a frozen scream. Eli was gone. I tore through the house, closets, attic, basement. Nothing. The only sound was the wind. When Mrs. Halbrook came home around 7, she looked calm. Too calm. She carried a small boy in her arms. Same blonde hair, same eyes. "This is Eli," she said simply. I stared at her. What do you mean?" "Eli's gone." She tilted her head. "You must be tired." I pointed at the crack in the mirror. "Something happened last night. That thing, whatever it was." "You signed the contract," she interrupted. Her tone had the finality of a closing door. "You did well. Payment will be in your account by noon." That was the end of it. She turned away, leading the boy, Eli, or someone like him, into the living room. I left before I could see his face again. Outside, the morning looked too bright. I got into my car, hands shaking, and started the engine. I kept telling myself to forget it. Just drive. But then I caught movement in the rearview mirror. A small shape in the back seat. At first, I thought it was a trick of light. Then I heard it soft whispering my name. Over and over like a lullaby unraveling. Mara. Mara. I didn't turn. I couldn't. My eyes stayed locked on the road even when tears blurred the view. The whispering got louder, closer, until it wasn't just a sound but a vibration crawling under my skin. I glanced up once, just once, and saw his face. pale, perfect, eyes like dull glass. He smiled. Then the mirror cracked, thin fissures spreading like veins. The whisper stopped, but when I blinked, I realized my breath had fogged the glass from the inside. I signed up to help people. I didn't expect to meet the one who would destroy me. When I filled out the volunteer form for Edenvale Correctional Facility, I imagined redemption stories, second chances, maybe a few tearful confessions I could tell my professors about later. I didn't expect the smell. That sterile metallic scent that clings to concrete, bleach, and people who've forgotten what rain feels like. The first time I stepped inside, I felt the air shift. Dense, watchful. I'm Rachel Dunn, 29, psychology grad student at SUNY Albany. And for 6 months, I've been volunteering as a counseling intern at Edenvale. Every Thursday, I'd drive 2 hours upstate, sip burnt coffee from the vending machine, and sit across from men who'd traded their freedom for one bad decision too many. Most of them barely looked at me. Some cried, some flirted out of boredom. But it always ended the same way. "Thank you for listening, Miss Dunn. See you next week." Then came inmate DeForo29, Caleb Voss. No priors. No listed address. Arrested for walking uninvited into a suburban family's dining room and sitting at their table until police arrived. No threats, no weapon, just silence. When they asked why he did it, he said he was waiting for Rachel. My name. When the warden told me that, I laughed, a shaky sound I immediately regretted. Probably a coincidence, I said, though the word tasted like dust. The first time I saw him, he was already smiling. They brought him into the counseling room, a small, windowless cube with a metal table and 2 plastic chairs. He was tall, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that looked too clean for prison, and eyes that held something, calm but wrong. Not insanity, familiarity. "Good morning," I said, setting my clipboard down. "I'm Rachel." "I know," he said quietly. It wasn't flirtation or mockery. He said it like a fact. I forced a smile. "You must be Mr. Voss." "Caleb," he corrected. "You don't have to pretend we haven't met." "We haven't." He tilted his head, studying me. "You've changed your hair. You used to tuck it behind your ear when you were nervous." I froze. My hand twitched toward my hair before I caught myself. "I think you're mistaking me for someone else." He smiled wider. "No, Rachel. You just don't remember." The way he said it, calm, patient, certain, made the room feel smaller. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Let's talk about why you were in that house." He leaned back, eyes half-lidded. "I was waiting for you to come back." For the rest of the session, he barely spoke. Just watched me, head tilted like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. When I ended early, he whispered, "Thursday's too far away." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, that voice that lingered just a little too long on my name. My apartment was dark except for the glow of my laptop. I checked the volunteer roster. No one else named Rachel. I called my mom, tried to sound casual, asked if she'd ever heard of a Caleb Voss. She hadn't. At 3:12 a.m., my phone rang. "No caller ID," I answered without thinking. Static. Then my name whispered slow. "Rachel." I hung up, heart hammering. The call log showed nothing. The next morning, I told the warden what happened. He looked exhausted, rubbing his temples. He doesn't have access to a phone. Inmates don't get personal calls. Then how? "It was probably a prank, Miss Dunn. Don't let him get to you." But that was the problem. He already had. By the next Thursday, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Coincidence. Misheard static. But when I entered the counseling room, Caleb was already speaking, under his breath, low and rhythmic. "What are you saying?" I asked. He stopped mid-sentence. "You dream about lakes." I stared. "Excuse me?" "You talk in your sleep," he said. Loud. I felt cold all over. "How could you possibly?" "You shouldn't leave your window open." I stood up so fast the chair screeched against the floor. "Session's over." As I walked out, he called after me, still calm. "I just wanted to finish the song your father never did." I didn't even turn around. But that night I remembered it, the lullaby. The one Dad used to hum before he left. I hadn't thought of it in 20 years. At 3:12 a.m., the phone rang again. This time I let it. The static hissed in waves, then a low hum, soft, almost musical. The lullaby. The next week, Caleb's cell was found empty, no broken locks, no open windows. The security feed froze at 3:12 a.m., the same minute my phone had rung every night that week. The warden said it was a technical failure. He looked pale when he said it. The news spread through the facility like rot. Inmates whispering, guards double-checking gates. I stopped volunteering, told myself I needed a break, but my phone still rang. Same time, same silence. 2 days later, I found an envelope in my campus mailbox. No return address. Inside, one piece of paper. Thank you for letting me out. No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. It was mine. I took it to the campus police. The officer squinted, unimpressed. Could be a sick prank. You got any exes? I left before he could finish. That night, I pushed my dresser against the window and slept with the lights on. Around 3 a.m., I woke to soft knocking. Not loud, delicate fingertips. I told myself it was branches, wind, anything but what it sounded like. But then I saw my reflection in the window. It smiled before I did. I stumbled back, heart slamming, staring as the reflection's lips moved slightly out of sync. It mouthed something I couldn't hear, 3 syllables, slow. Then it leaned closer and I realized the breath fog on the glass was coming from inside. When I looked again, it was gone. I stopped answering my phone. I started leaving campus before dark. I told my professors I was sick, that the drive was too much. But the world didn't stop bending. I'd see Caleb's shape in crowds, a flash of his gray sweatshirt reflected in passing windows. At the grocery store, in my rearview mirror, in the glass of the bus shelter, always watching, never there. My mother visited once. She said I looked tired. You should talk to someone, she said, meaning a therapist. I am, I almost said, but the words caught. That night I recorded myself sleeping just to prove I was imagining things. When I played it back, there was silence for hours. Then at 3:12, a soft creak. A voice, mine, saying, "He's here." Then another voice layered beneath it, identical but deeper. "Thursday's too far away." I smashed my phone against the floor. The next morning, someone had taped a note to my door. Stop fighting it. I knew the handwriting before I even touched it. The police came again after I reported a break-in. They found no forced entry, no fingerprints, no sign of disturbance. The officer looked at me carefully. "You sure you're okay, Miss Dunn?" I wasn't sure of anything. The nights bled together after that. Sometimes I'd wake and find my notebook pages filled in my own handwriting, except it wasn't mine anymore. Letters tighter, sharper, words I didn't remember writing. He lives in the silence between. I started sleeping on the couch, facing away from the window. Once I woke up to humming behind me. The lullaby. I turned slowly, breath shaking. The window was closed. My reflection stared back, still empty-eyed but smiling faintly like it pitied me. I whispered, "What do you want?" Its lips moved. "To stay." And then the glass cracked. Now I don't sleep much. My professors think I dropped out. My friends stopped calling after I stopped answering. Every night, 3:12 comes and goes, and I sit in the dark, listening, waiting. Sometimes I hear knocking again, 3 soft taps like the start of a song. Sometimes the phone rings and I almost answer. Sometimes when I speak, the words come out too smooth, too low, too much like him. My reflection still smiles before I do. And when I try to sing, it finishes the lullaby for me. I used to believe that working in other people's homes was safer than living in my own. It sounds naive now, but cleaning for strangers always felt like control. Other people's messes were predictable. Dust, clutter, wine stains, secrets that stayed silent in drawers. My own life was the chaos I couldn't scrub out. Cleaning gave me order, quiet, the illusion of being invisible in someone else's story. I'm Camille Hart, 37, professional housekeeper in Burlington, Vermont. Most of my clients lived around the lake, second homes for New Yorkers with too much money and too little time. They liked me because I was discreet, efficient, and forgettable. They could leave me in their bedrooms, their safes, their lives, and I'd vanish without a trace when the job was done. That was before the Langfords. Their house sat on the North Shore, 3 stories of glass and dark wood that caught the lake's reflection like a mirror. When I first arrived, the drive up the winding private road smelled like pine and rain. The air was so still it felt suspended. Mr. Langford greeted me at the door, smiling politely, one hand in his pocket. "Mrs. Langford's inside," he said. "She's not feeling well, but she wanted to meet you." He was the kind of man who filled silence easily, his voice low, deliberate, too controlled. His face never fully relaxed when he smiled. Everything about him was precise. Mrs. Langford was sitting by the picture window overlooking the lake. Thin, pale, fragile in that way that makes people call you delicate instead of dying. She looked up at me with watery eyes and said softly, "Thank you for coming. I'm so sorry the house is not what it should be." It was immaculate. "You'll find everything in the supply room," Mr. Langford said. "And one thing, Ms. Hart, please don't touch the locked closet in our bedroom." I nodded because clients always had boundaries. I didn't ask questions. That was part of the job. But even from the first day, the closet unsettled me. It was at the far end of the master bedroom, behind a heavy oak door, the kind of lock that looked older than the house itself. When I vacuumed near it, I could feel the faint vibration under the floorboards, a hum so low it seemed alive. Mrs. Langford caught me looking once. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't open it. Ever." I told her I wouldn't. I meant it. Still, every time I passed that door, I thought I heard something. Breathing, maybe. A faint shift of air that didn't belong to an empty space. A week later, while dusting, I knocked my duster against the frame. From the other side, something knocked back. Once. I froze, waiting. Then, another softer tap. When I asked Mrs. Langford about it, she looked terrified. "Don't tell him," she whispered, "please. He doesn't like when I talk about it." "Who?" I asked, but she didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a small brass key into my hand. "If I disappear," she said, "clean it out. Burn everything." That night, I lay awake thinking about her voice, how desperate she'd sounded, how the key had felt warm against my palm like it had been held too long. The next morning, Mrs. Langford was gone. Mr. Langford said she'd gone to stay with her sister in Montreal. He smiled as he said it, as if rehearsed. The police confirmed it. No foul play, just a missing person with a passport and a history of anxiety. He gave me a raise the same day. "Things will be quiet for a while," he told me. "I appreciate your loyalty." Loyalty. I didn't know what he thought I owed him, but something about his tone made me stay longer than I should have. Days passed, and the house felt heavier. The lake smell seeped into the hallways, damp, metallic like old coins. The humming behind the closet door grew louder. I stopped vacuuming near it because the floor trembled under my feet. I told myself to quit, to leave the key where it was, to mind my business. But curiosity isn't something you can scrub away. One afternoon, I used the key. The door opened with a sigh, as if relieved. Inside, the smell of bleach hit me first, sharp enough to sting. There were gloves, rolls of duct tape, folded rags. On a low table, a black dress still warm. My fingers brushed the fabric. It pulsed faintly like heat from skin. Then I saw the shelf. Dozens of Polaroids neatly arranged. Women all wearing the same black dress, standing in front of the same lakefront window. Blank expressions, eyes unfocused. Every one of them wore the same gold bracelet. The same one on my wrist, a gift from Mrs. Langford my first week. I stumbled back, bile rising. My shoulder hit the door and it swung wider, creaking. Behind it, something shifted. A faint click. Then another. Polaroid cameras, all of them pointed at me. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and ran. That night, I packed my things, determined to leave. But when I reached the door, Mr. Langford was standing there, coat draped over his arm, smile easy as ever. "Going somewhere?" he asked. My mother's sick," I said, voice breaking. He stepped closer, closing the door behind him. "You clean so well, Camille. It's hard to find people like you. Mr. Langford, you'll make a fine addition." He said it like a compliment, like a promise. I tried to push past him, but his hand shot out, gripping my wrist. The gold bracelet cut into my skin. "Where is she?" I demanded. "What did you do to your wife?" He smiled, too close now. "You should see the closet." The next thing I remember is the sound of the lake, soft waves slapping against the dock. I must have run, or fallen. I woke up in the guest room, sunlight already dimming. My clothes were damp, my bracelet gone. The closet was locked again. When I called the police, they told me no one by the name Langford owned property on the lake. The address didn't exist in their records. But every week, my paycheck still arrived. Same envelope, same amount, same return address. I stopped cashing them months ago. Sometimes, I drive past the house just to see if it's real. It always is. The window's dark. The same hum I can almost hear from the car. Last week I saw movement inside. Someone dusting the staircase, slow and careful. A new housekeeper, young blonde, wearing a gold bracelet. When she paused to adjust a picture frame, I saw it clearly. My face frozen in a Polaroid behind glass. My own eyes staring back at me from the hallway wall. And just for a second, she looked toward the master bedroom door, head tilted, like she'd heard something knock from the other side. I wanted to warn her. I wanted to scream, but my throat only filled with static. Now, when the night wind comes off the lake, I feel it press against the closet door, the hum rising until it feels like breath. The keyhole glows faintly with light. I watch her through it, the new housekeeper, dusting, folding, humming. I'm waiting for her to hear the knock. I never believed evil could hide behind a polite smile and a clipboard, but that was before Mr. Greer walked into my classroom. It was a Monday morning in late September, the kind of crisp Tennessee day when the air feels cleaner than it should. Like a trick before the cold sets in, I was running late. Coffee spilled on my blouse, lesson plans half printed, the usual chaos that comes with wrangling 21st graders at Redwood Elementary. When I reached my room, he was already there. "Morning, Miss Hensley," he said, smiling. "Principal told me to get settled while you parked." He looked ordinary in the most unnerving way, khakis, button-down, neat haircut. The kind of man you forget as soon as he walks by. Yet his smile lingered, stretched just a little too long. He was holding a clipboard, pen poised like he was already taking notes. I should have been grateful. Substitute teachers were hard to find, especially mid-year. But the moment his eyes met mine, something in me stiffened. His gaze didn't feel like looking, it felt like reading. The kids adored him instantly. Within an hour, he knew every name, favorite color, and what each one wanted to be when they grew up. He performed simple magic tricks between lessons. Coins behind ears, rubber bands through fingers. They shrieked with laughter, crowding him like he was some kind of hero. I wanted to like him. God, I did. I wanted to believe he was just another overqualified, underpaid man doing his job. But the way he watched people, me especially, it felt rehearsed. Like he was following a script only he could see. That first day, he borrowed my classroom key. "Just for the day," he said, smiling again. The janitor locked up the supply closet early. I didn't think much of it until the next morning. My desk drawers had been rearranged. Neatly. Obsessively. Paper clips sorted by size, pens lined up. My mug moved half an inch to the left. And my spare lipstick, and the one I kept buried under a stack of worksheets, was open, smeared. When he saw me later, he said, "That's a lovely scent you wear, Miss Hensley." "Lilac, isn't it?" I froze. I only wore perfume at home. That night, I went through every room in my apartment, double-checking locks. I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, I placed a chair against the front door before bed. By Wednesday, even the janitor, Harold, had noticed something strange. "Hey, Miss Hensley," he said as I packed up. "You been working late?" "No, why? Light's been on in your room after midnight all week. I figured you were grading papers or something." My stomach turned. I drove back that night, flashlight in hand, to check. The building was dark except for the faint glow from under my classroom door. When I opened it, the lights flickered once, then went out completely. The next day, I asked to see the security footage. The tech guy, Craig, frowned at his screen. "That's weird. Every clip between midnight and 3 a.m., corrupted, like someone wiped them clean. Can you restore them? He hesitated. You sure you want me to? The way he said it made my skin crawl. The following week, Mr. Greer started giving the kids gifts. Tiny wooden animals, rabbits, foxes, owls, hand-carved, he said, from good oak. The children loved them, clutching them like treasures. But when I looked closer, I saw the initials. Each carving had a child's name etched underneath, and mine, LH, carved deeper than all the rest. Did you make these? I asked. He smiled. Of course. Teaching's a craft, Miss Hensley. I just like leaving something behind. Something behind. That night I dreamed of my classroom door opening. A hand, his, setting one of those carved animals on my desk, pressing its tiny wooden paw into the surface until it left a mark. By morning, I was shaking. I told the principal, Mrs. Jennings, that I wanted him gone. He's making me uncomfortable, I said. She sighed. Lauren, the kids adore him. He's temporary, just until Mr. Wallace's surgery recovery. A few more weeks tops. He's been in my room after hours. Her smile faltered. Do you have proof? No, I didn't. That Friday we had a field trip scheduled. 2 buses. I took bus 1, Mr. Greer took bus 2. We were headed to the Knoxville Zoo. I checked the roll call twice before departure. 20 children total. My group pulled out first. His bus never arrived. By noon, the zoo staff started asking questions. By 2, the police were called. They found the bus abandoned 2 towns over, parked near a rest stop. All 20 seats empty. No Mr. Greer, no children. My purse sat on the dashboard. They said the onboard camera feeds failed. Corrupted again. The next few days blurred. Search teams, interviews, tears that didn't feel real. Everyone asking the same thing. What do you remember, Miss Hensley? I didn't know how to answer. The police suggested trauma, blackout, but there were flashes, faint impressions like film negatives burned into my skull. The hum of the bus engine. A child's laugh cut short. The smell of sawdust. Then, darkness. The school shut down for a week. Grief counselors came and went. Parents blamed me and I couldn't blame them. I blamed myself too. A week later, the first letter arrived, postmarked from nowhere. Each envelope addressed to a child's family, each written in the same looping handwriting. Miss Hensley is learning new lessons. She's smiling now. The police called it a hoax. People do sick things for attention, the detective said. But I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it on the corner of every carved animal. For months I avoided mirrors, turned off my phone, ignored the knocks at my door at night. My dreams were filled with whispering voices counting to 20 over and over. Then last night I drove past Redwood Elementary for the first time since it happened. The parking lot was full. A new substitute had started. I sat in my car, engine idling, watching through the window. He stood at the front of my old classroom, smiling. Same posture, same calm voice, same eyes. When the children laughed, I could almost hear their echoes from that bus. I got out, my legs trembling, drawn toward the building like a moth to a flame. The air smelled of rain and chalk dust. Inside, the halls looked smaller, fresher paint, brighter lights. My classroom door was open. The wall behind my old desk had been repainted pale blue, but under the light I saw it, faintly carved beneath the new coat of paint. Attendance, 20. My breath caught. My reflection in the window smiled before I did. Somewhere deep inside the building, I heard the sound of a bus engine turning over, and a man's voice. Warm and familiar calling roll. Lauren Hensley? My lips moved before I could stop them. Present. I used to think loneliness was my biggest fear. Then I met someone who loved it more than I ever could. I'd been caring for other people's parents for almost 2 decades when I took the job at the Caldwell estate. Live-in caretaker, nothing new, nothing dramatic. A week before, I'd left a nursing home position after a resident died during my shift. Heart attack, they said. But I'd been the one to find her body. Her hands still clutching the air like she'd tried to hold on to something that wasn't there. So when Dr. Thomas Caldwell called about his father, I told myself this would be quieter work, solitude and structure. That's all I ever wanted. Barrow Hill, Maine is one of those towns that looks like it's dying politely. Fog seeps in from the harbor. The air smells like iron and pine, and the houses are so far apart you can almost hear your thoughts echoing. The Caldwell house stood at the top of a slope. Gray shingles, 2 stories, the kind of place that should have been cozy but felt like an apology instead. When I arrived, the driveway was lined with wet leaves. The front porch sagged slightly. Inside, the air was cool. Not cold, but unnaturally still, like the house was holding its breath. Dr. Caldwell met me in the foyer. Early 40s, handsome in that brittle, sleepless way. His voice was soft, measured. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Monroe." "Elise, please," I said. He smiled faintly, not quite meeting my eyes. "You'll find my father upstairs. He's mostly bedridden. Doesn't speak much anymore. Meals at 6 and 10. Sheets changed every other day. Oh," he paused, glancing down the hallway. "One thing. Don't move the clock." I followed his gaze. The clock stood against the far wall, taller than me, carved from dark oak, its pendulum gleaming like wet brass. Faces were etched into the wood, tiny, indistinct expressions caught mid-scream or mid-song. I couldn't tell which. "Why not?" I asked. "It keeps the house in rhythm," he said simply, and walked away. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, listening. The house creaked in the kind of rhythm that made you think of footsteps. Every hour the clock chimed, not a clear, bright sound, but a heavy metallic groan, like it had to force the noise out of itself. At midnight it struck 13 times. I sat up, heart pounding. 13 I counted slowly, each chime deeper than the last. When the final strike faded, I heard movement. The faint rustle of sheets from Mr. Caldwell's room. I grabbed my robe and hurried upstairs. He was lying flat, eyes open wide, pupils huge and clouded. His mouth moved, soundless at first, then barely a whisper. "He's home." I told myself it was dementia, hallucination. 93 years old, nearly blind, confused. I soothed him, checked his pulse, adjusted his blankets. But even after I turned off the lamp, he kept staring toward the doorway, his lips trembling in a soundless rhythm that matched the pendulum's swing. The next morning, I mentioned it to Dr. Caldwell over breakfast. He stirred his coffee, not looking up. He talks in his sleep sometimes. He wasn't asleep. Then he was dreaming. Something in his tone, too even, too polished, made me stop asking. Days passed. The weather worsened. Wind rattled the windows at night like impatient hands. The house grew colder, though the thermostat stayed fixed. Mr. Caldwell never spoke again, but every night when the 13th chime came, his eyes would snap open. And I began to hear it too, the faint, deliberate sound of footsteps upstairs. The problem was, no one was supposed to be upstairs. My room was on the main floor, his next door the doctor's office down the hall. The second floor was for storage, he'd said, but sometimes I'd hear drawers open, a chair scraping. On the 4th night I called out, "Dr. Caldwell?" A pause. Then a calm, distant voice answered from above, "It's just the caretaker." My stomach went cold. "I'm the caretaker," I whispered. The footsteps stopped. The next morning, I asked Dr. Caldwell if anyone else lived there. "No," he said too quickly. "Just us." "Then who's upstairs?" He smiled. "You're overtired, Miss Monroe. The house is old. It creaks." I almost believed him, until I found the needle and thread. It was on the nightstand beside Mr. Caldwell's bed. Silver thread, taut and stained dark near the tip. His lips had small red marks at the corners, healing punctures like something had once been sewn shut. When I asked the doctor, he said nothing. Just looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Don't go into the attic." That night I didn't sleep at all. The clock ticked too loudly, each swing echoing in my chest. At midnight I crept into the hall, flashlight in hand. The pendulum gleamed as it moved, the carved faces catching light in flickers that looked like breathing. At the first chime, I froze. At the 13th, I heard something else. A second chime. From upstairs. 2 clocks, keeping time together. I climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight shaking. The air grew colder with every step. At the landing, a smell hit me. Sweet, chemical, unmistakable. Formaldehyde. The attic door was half open. Inside, the light bulb buzzed faintly. And in the center of the room, sitting perfectly still in a rocking chair, was Mr. Caldwell. His skin was gray and waxy. His hands folded neatly in his lap. His eyes half-lidded, and stitched across his mouth. Black thread, knotted tight. He'd been embalmed. Behind me, the floor creaked. I turned. Dr. Caldwell stood in the doorway, holding a needle and a fresh spool of thread. His face was calm, expressionless. He didn't like when people moved the clock, he said softly. The rhythm keeps him content. I stumbled back. He's dead, Thomas. Everyone here is. He said it like it was a kindness, like it explained everything. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember running. Just the sound of the clock downstairs striking once, twice again, until it felt like the whole house was breathing with it. When I woke, it was morning. The attic door was shut. The doctor was gone. The police found no trace of embalming fluid, no body, no attic chair. The clock was still there, pendulum swinging. When I tried to explain, they looked at me with pity. Grief response, one said. Caretakers get attached. I quit the job that day, packed what little I owned, left Barrow Hill. But sometimes at night when I can't sleep, I hear it. The same slow rhythm in the walls. Tick, swing, breathe. Last month, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a small brass key. And a note. You forgot to wind the clock. Now I live alone again. Different town, smaller house. I keep telling myself I won't use the key, that it doesn't fit any door I own. But last night I heard something upstairs. A chair creaking in time with the wind. And when I checked the corner of my room, I realized my reflection in the window was moving just a half-second too slow, as if waiting for the next chime. 13. Always 13. I think I finally understand what he meant about the rhythm. It's not the house that needs it. It's me. I never trusted the sound of humming through walls. It started as a faint vibration, a whisper under the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the creaks of my old Denver duplex. The kind of sound you could almost convince yourself was nothing. Almost. I'm Tessa Ward, 33, a freelance illustrator who works too many nights alone, painting strangers' faces for online commissions and listening to the house breathe. My place sat on Oak Ridge Lane, a quiet street where the most exciting thing was the weekly garbage truck or the occasional lost Amazon package. I liked it that way, predictable, boring, safe. My neighbor, Mr. Brantley, lived in the adjoining unit. Mid-50s, tall, lean, always tucked into collared shirts and pressed slacks even when mowing his lawn. He had this polite, old-fashioned way about him. He'd wave every morning at exactly 8:02 a.m. as I opened my blinds. Always the same motion, one slow wave, a nod, then he'd turn back to his garden. Routine, clockwork, comfortable, until the humming. It was late, maybe past midnight. I was sketching at my desk, half listening to a podcast when I noticed it. A soft, low tone, barely audible, threading through the floorboards beneath me. It wasn't mechanical, not the usual rattle of pipes or vents. It was rhythmic, like a voice holding a note that rose and fell, deliberate and alive. At first I thought it was my imagination. Too much caffeine, too little sleep. But when I pressed my ear to the floor, the sound grew sharper. It had direction. It came from under my apartment. The next morning I caught him in his yard. "Hey, Mr. Brantley," I called, trying to sound casual. "Do you have something running in your basement? I heard a weird humming last night." He looked up from his garden shears, smiling. "You probably hear my dehumidifier. Basements talk in old houses." I nodded, pretending to believe him. But something about that smile stretched a little too long, eyes too still, and made my stomach twist. The thing was, my unit didn't have a basement, and if his did, it shouldn't have been under my floor. That night, the humming came back. Louder this time, deep enough that the glass of water on my nightstand quivered. I covered my ears with my pillow, but the sound seemed to move through my bones. The next morning, my cat Miso was gone. The window was still locked, food untouched. Her collar sat neatly on the counter. I searched the neighborhood for hours, calling until my throat hurt, but there was nothing. When I got home, there was a new doormat outside my door. Identical to mine, except for one thing. A thin red thread woven through the edge, subtle but deliberate, like someone had stitched it by hand. I assumed I was losing it. Maybe I swapped it by mistake. Maybe the landlord replaced them. But when I lifted it, the floor underneath was damp. Cold. The humming returned that night, faint but constant. I started sleeping on the couch with the TV on, the volume low enough to drown the sound without alerting my nerves. I told myself it was plumbing, or the wind, until the power went out. The whole block went dark. I lit a candle and sat by the window listening to the hum outside, louder now, bleeding through the walls like it was trying to reach me. Then through the rain I saw it, a faint yellow glow between our buildings, low to the ground, flickering like a lantern. When I stepped outside, the air smelled of wet dirt and something metallic. I followed the glow to where our foundations nearly touched. There, half buried under years of overgrowth, was a narrow door. Wood swollen from rain, its hinges rusted. The light came from beneath it, steady and pulsing like a heartbeat. My breath fogged in the cold as I crouched down. "Mr. Brantley?" No answer. Just the humming, louder now, clearly a voice. Curiosity overrode fear, a stupid reflex I wish I could undo. I pulled the door open. The smell hit first. Bleach, old wood, something sweet underneath. The light came from a single bulb hanging over a work table. The basement was immaculate. Shelves lined with jars labeled in precise handwriting. Ash, soil, thread, wax. Tools hung on the wall, arranged by size, gleaming under the pale light. The floor was spotless, concrete polished smooth, and in the center of the room stood a mannequin. It wore my favorite sweater, the gray one with the tiny paint stain on the cuff. Around its neck was Miso's collar. The face was covered in plaster, molded perfectly into my own features. My nose, my mouth, my half-smile caught mid-expression. Behind it hung rows of other masks, each slightly different, each bearing a faint trace of humanity. A chipped tooth, a faint mole, a curl of hair trapped in the plaster. Dozens of them. I stepped back, choking on the smell. Then came the humming again, but this time it was behind me. I turned slowly. Mr. Brantley stood in the doorway, holding a glass jar. Inside, floating in cloudy fluid, was a coil of red thread. "You left this on my doorstep, Tessa," he said softly. "I like keeping things neat." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The candlelight flickered across his face, and I saw something in his eyes. Not rage or madness, but pleasure. Familiarity. He took one slow step forward, still humming. "You shouldn't have come down here." I ran. I don't remember how. The next thing I knew, I was in my bed, daylight burning my eyes. My head pounded. My sweater was gone. So was my phone. The police said he'd moved away overnight. "Packed up quietly," one officer said. "No forwarding address." They found nothing in the basement, no mannequins, no jars, no door between our buildings. My friends told me I'd had a breakdown. Stress, isolation, imagination. I let them believe it because it was easier than the alternative. But at night, when the house is still, the humming returns. Softer now, beneath the floorboards. Sometimes I wake to faint vibrations under my mattress, like someone pacing directly below me. Last week, I found a jar outside my door. No label this time. Just a coil of red thread floating inside. And last night, I heard my own voice humming with his. Same pitch, same rhythm, perfectly in sync. I tell myself it's a dream. I tell myself he's gone. But deep down, I know he's still keeping things neat. I stopped believing in God long before I started hearing his voice. For years, I thought faith was something that could be unlearned, that you could peel it off like old paint and throw it away. But faith is more like mildew. It waits in the dark until the air gets damp again. I learned that the hard way at St. Bartholomew's. My name is Megan Rourke, 30 years old, divorced, jobless, and lost enough to accept a janitor position at a church I hadn't stepped inside since college. I was a theology major once, back when I thought understanding God meant being close to him. Now I just understood silence. The church stood on the corner of Chestnut and Angel, its bell tower cutting into the Providence fog like a warning. Inside, everything smelled of wax and wood polish with that faint metallic tang that clings to old pipes and older sins. Father Alden was the first person I met there. Late 50s, kind voice, eyes too soft to be trusted. He shook my hand longer than necessary and said he admired people who served the church in practical ways. When he learned I'd studied theology, he asked if I'd been to confession lately. I told him I wasn't Catholic anymore. He smiled. The booth still listens, even if you don't. I laughed, but something in his tone stayed with me. Most nights I worked alone after evening mass. The church would empty, the doors would lock, and it was just me, the echo of my footsteps and the hush that settles when faith goes to sleep. I'd sweep the aisles, polish the pews, dust the gold-edged Bible by the altar. The rhythm was comforting. Clean, quiet repeat, until the voices started. The first night I heard them, I thought it was wind through the pipes, low, steady murmuring coming from the back of the sanctuary. I followed the sound to the confessional, the old wooden booth tucked beneath a stained glass window of St. Peter. The air near it felt thick, like breathing through velvet. The voices were soft, pleading, words slipping in and out of clarity. I crouched beside the door, listening. "Forgive me. Please, forgive me." I yanked the door open. The booth was empty. My pulse wouldn't slow. I left the mop where it was and went home early, telling myself I'd imagined it. But the next night it happened again. Same hour, same tone. I pulled out my phone and started recording, pressing it against the door until my arm shook. When I played it back, the file was blank. Not silent, blank. As if it had been erased mid-recording. All that remained was a single whisper backward, distorted, "Stay." I deleted it, but I couldn't delete the feeling. The next morning I told Father Alden what I'd heard. He smiled, that same patient smile. Sometimes the church remembers voices long after they're gone. Buildings have souls too. You're saying it's haunted. I'm saying it's listening. He walked away, leaving the faint scent of incense and something sharper. Iron, maybe. Over the next week, the confessional became my obsession. I'd finish cleaning early just to stand near it, waiting for the murmurs to begin. They always came around midnight, just after the bell struck 12. The words were clearer now. Not prayers, not Latin, just confessions. I killed him. I buried her. Help me. Each voice sounded different, but the tone, the guilt, was the same. One night, I found a note tucked under a pew. Folded neatly, paper yellowed at the edges. On it, in neat handwriting, "I know what you did." I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echo off the walls. I ran to the rectory, found Father Alden in his study. "Someone's playing games," I said, shoving the note toward him. "You need to check the cameras." He glanced at it, then at me. "There are no cameras in the sanctuary. We believe in privacy here." "That's insane." He smiled again. "Some truths don't like being recorded." When I returned to my apartment that night, there was another note waiting under my door. Same paper, same handwriting, but this one was worse. "You don't have to hide it anymore, Megan. I forgive you. I didn't sleep." Every sound, the radiator hiss, the ticking clock, felt like a heartbeat not my own. I tried to remember if I'd ever told Father Alden about my ex-husband, about the fights, about the restraining order that never got filed. But no, I'd never told him his name. The next evening, I found fingerprints inside the priest's side of the confessional. Fresh, deep grooves in the varnish, like someone had clawed at the wall. And the smell, sweet, rotten, metallic. I pushed open the divider. No one there. Just a small tape recorder still playing. The voice on it was male, trembling, broken, confessing to murder, naming the victim, describing the knife, the time, the blood. The name was Aaron Rourke, my ex-husband. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly I dropped the recorder and the tape kept spinning, spilling words into the air like static. Behind me, a shadow stretched across the floor. Father Alden stood by the altar, eyes glazed, mouth curled in something like joy. "You came to confess at last," he said softly. "But I already forgave you." I stumbled back, heart slamming, words caught in my throat. I never." He took a step closer. "We're all guilty, Megan. The church only waits for you to admit it." Something in his tone shifted, too calm, too certain. His gaze flicked toward the confessional where the recorder still hissed. "He came here first, you know. Your husband. He begged to understand why you stopped answering his calls." I ran. I don't even remember getting home. The next morning I quit. I told the diocese I'd found another job, that I was moving out of state. They didn't ask questions. But I can't escape the sound. Every church bell that rings now, every Sunday sermon that leaks from a passing radio, carries it. The same whisper from that recording. Stay. Sometimes I hear my name woven into it, soft and patient like a hand resting on the back of my neck. Last week, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of St. Bartholomew's stationery. One line written neatly across the center. Confession hours never end. Now I avoid churches. I cross the street when I see a steeple, but it doesn't matter. The voice follows. Sometimes when I sleep, it hums through the walls like a prayer I once knew by heart. Sometimes it sounds like Father Alden. Sometimes it sounds like Aaron. And sometimes when I wake in the dark, my knees already pressed into the floor, I realize I've been whispering back, "Forgive me."